to your daily dose of Dragon Feather. Today, I found this gold mine while I was out and about. Okay, I did some errands today with my boyfriend, and I came across this vintage book from 1971. Okay, it's called The First Sex by Elizabeth Gould Davis. And let me tell you something. This book started talking about dragons, about the origin of God being a woman, about looking for just the origins of civilization. This book is awesome. So it talks about dragons, it talks about fairies, it talks about druidry, it talks about paganism, it talks about all of the religions we talk about on this channel, it talks about lost cultures, it talks about everything. So if you are as excited as I am, we are going to kind of just like, I guess, read through this book for today in our little like late night sleepover situation. So if you're excited, please grab a snack, please grab a drink, grab a book of your own. Maybe you want to grab a journal because tonight's little situation here is going to be insane. So I'm super excited. So Jupiter Haven, hello. Welcome back to your daily dose of Dragon Feather. Archdragon, hey, hi, hello. Welcome back to your daily dose of Dragon Feather. I found a vintage book from 1971 called The First Sex by Elizabeth Gould Davis, and it is about surprise dragons and fairies and Celtic mythology and druidry and how the origins of God are feminine. And I thought that we should just read this. Hey Azura, do you still want the Gateway Experience tapes? Yes, Karina, I would love that. If you could email them to me, that would probably be better. My email is azuradragonfeatherofficial@gmail.com, but what are we gathering books and journals for? Because, Phoenix Holly, we are going to take a deep dive into the origins of human history today with this book, and how the origins of human history point to the original god being a dragon goddess. So that's why you might want your journals, because there's some crazy stuff in here. And so I just feel like we can, kind of do like a little story time read along, take breaks in between, chat about what we read, because I've been reading it today. I cannot get my head out of it, so I had to bring you guys with me. But the reason that really compelled me to this book in the first place is that like it has like writing all over it. Like somebody clearly had this book before. And the best part is that it was a man who had this book before, who's like dissecting all of this feminist literature in like the most misogynistic way, which is really embarrassing, and how I know I got the really good book, okay? Because like the men are literally had to mark it up because they were so mad about this book. So because of that, I cannot wait to share it with you. And I'm sure you could find a PDF of this online because of how old it is, and I'm just excited. So we're gonna jump into it. But I really had to read the dedication because it really struck a chord with me. It says, "Dedicated to the memory of my sister Barbara, whose tragic death in 1968 impelled this work, for to put away my grief, I proposed to commence a book. Marie of France." So let's just jump right into this. We're going to, take it easy. I'm not gonna like go too heavy hardcore with you guys, but let's just hear me out, friends. In a word, life begins as female. The female is not only the primary and original sex, but continues throughout as the main trunk. The further development of life serves to strengthen this geniocentric, female-centered point of view. Yet statements of the androcentric, male-centered theory are met with everywhere. Not only do philosophers and popular writers never tire of repeating its main propositions, but anthropologists and biologists will go out of their way to defend it, while at the same time heaping up facts that really contradict it and strongly support the geniocentric theory. The androcentric theory is deeply stamped upon the popular mind and the history of human thought, as demonstrated many times that scarcely any number of facts opposed to such a worldview can shake it. All the entrance is saying is that even in our scholarly studies of today, like our scholarly studies of science and of archaeology, all of what we discover in the sciences and in archaeology will point to God, or point to the divine being woman, will point to the originators of civilization being the women. even in our history. So the indoctrination of the male god is so programmed into our brain and into our society that it is even more harder for us to kind of conceptualize a reality without it. Archdragon, maybe God is monosexual too? Yes. So this actually talks about how originally it was all modern societies, all civilized societies were run with a goddess head, right? Like a goddess was worshipped, and it was the women who led these civilizations. However, over time, they became, what's it called? They became both sexes, or like hermaphrodites, essentially. And then over time into a male god, right? But now I would say more so recently, there is like more of this like movement beyond the binary, as in terms of deity. So let's do this, okay? Because this is really interesting. So this work is the result of the convergence of two streams of thought. The first, that the earliest civilization we know was but a renewal of a then dimly remembered and now utterly forgotten older one. And the second, that the impelling and revivifying agent in what we know as civilization was women. The two originally separate streams, each spring independently from its own well of evidence, flowed finally into a broad river of conviction that could no longer be denied expression, meaning that the further and further back we look, the further and further back we look. Oh my god, I can already tell that tonight is going to be a busy night with that title, Nightmare View Studios. I'm really happy to have you here though, because I couldn't do it without you. And let me tell you something. I wouldn't make a video with that kind of title without shit to back me up. That's why I have this book in my hand, because like I would not have the audacity to make a video like that otherwise. But anyway, I digress. So it says the first conviction, now shared by a growing number of the cognitive minority, was that something must have preceded the earliest historical societies to account for the many incongruities, as the Soviet ethologist M.M. Agreste called them, that occur throughout the world. These unaccountable anomalies, like the flash of a gold tooth in an infant's mouth, startled one's complacency about the intellectual superiority of modern man, and jolted the old belief in the technical ignorance of our remote ancestors. Basically, what we have today as society is essentially just a regression of the great cities that the great societies, the great peoples, the great civilizations that used to exist many, many, many times before us. So you're already working overtime, Nightmare Fuel Studios. Love you so much. Anyway, I was reading something similar from Greek mythology before and after colonizing, kind of off topic, but Phoenix, no, it's not Phoenix Holly, because this book also talks about how Greek mythology, a lot of the Greek deities that are male today are only male today because of their original feminine origins. They were, especially if they're gods of creation, like really powerful goddesses of creation, then they were taken and turned into male over time, which is very fascinating to me. So we are going to get into that for sure. But the thought kept intruding itself that modern man was a repeater, that every discovery he made and every invention he conceived had been discovered and invented before in a forgotten past civilization of tens or even hundreds of thousands of years ago, which is like, no offense, why I literally will be the first to tell you that the society we live in today is but a degradation of what it should be. You know what I mean? The very first proof of deities was Venus statue that is for 40,000 years, I believe. Interesting. I did not know that. UNSC Dark Noble Media. Welcome back to your daily dose of Dragon Feather, by the way. Yes, that's what I learned too. Phoenix Holly, exactly. Oh my gosh, this is really exciting. Okay. I literally cannot even breathe. I'm so excited about this book. It's like that serious. Okay. The second stream of thought was that in ancient times, indeed well into the historical era, women had played a dominant role. The tradition shared by all early peoples, but glossed over by later historians and myth interpreters, that it was woman who had preserved the germ of the lost civilization and had brought it into its second flowering, was too insistent to be ignored. The primacy of goddess over gods, of queens over kings, of great matriarchs who had first tamed and then re-educated man, all pointed to the fact of a once genocratic world. The further back one traced man's history, the larger loomed the figure of a woman. If the gods and goddesses of today are but the heroes and heroines of yesterday, then unquestionably the goddesses of historical times were but the reflected memory of the ruling hierarchy of a former civilization. Bismillah. My reading. Holy shit. I literally could be reading this book without anyone watching. Like, that's how crazy this is. Oh, Sigmar. Oh my gosh, your freaking username, brother. Sigmar is the one. Did I say it right? Did I say your name right? Anyway, welcome back to your daily dose of Dragon Feather. We are talking about how God is a witch. Get mad at my comments. Okay. Okay, ready? Continuing. It says the existence of such a civilization would account, as no other theory could, universality of certain custom, rites, and taboos that could not have been disseminated in historical times. It would explain the similarity of creation myths throughout the world and would account for all the apparent kinship of the mythical gods and heroes of all peoples. It would explain the worldwide tradition of the wonderful strangers, the existence of the ancient maps, the otherwise incomprehensible origin of language, the anomalous gold mines of Theris and Kanariask, I think that's Russian, I'm really sorry about that. The incongruous optical lens of ancient Navia, or Navia, the worked gold thread found embedded in a rock deposit that was formed millennia ago. It would explain the Sumerian seals depicting the true structure of the universe, the accuracy of ancient calendars and sundials, the ancient megalithic buildings and monuments scattered all over the face of the earth, the 7 sages of ancient Greece and their evident knowledge of scientific truths, later discredited and forgotten, the legends of Hermes Trismegistus, Thoth, and other wizards of antiquity, and it would account for the universal tradition of a great cataclysm that once engulfed the world in a holocaust of flame and flood. Chance, wrote the Civilian Bailey, could not account for such a wonderful coincidences. They must all have been derived from one common source. Brother. Lunar Rainbow, hello, welcome back to your daily dose of Dragon Feather. We are great. We found an amazing book that's about the history of humankind and how God was originally what? A dragon witch. Thank you very much. I would not make the title what it is if I did not have some crazy fucking facts to back it up. But this book is my Bible now. I don't care. I don't care what anyone says. This book is my Bible. Okay, moving forward. It says, when recorded history begins, we behold the finale of the long pageant of prehistory, the pageant of the great lost civilization that constituted the source of all these wonderful coincidences. The curtain of written history rises on what seems to be the tragic last act of a protracted drama. On the stage, firmly entrenched on her ancient throne, appears woman, the heroine of the play. About her, her industrious subjects perform their age-old roles: peace, justice, progress, equality, play their parts with a practiced perfection. Off in the wings, however, we hear a faint rumbling, the rumbling of the discontented, the jealous complaints of the new men who are no longer satisfied with their secondary role in society. Led perhaps by the queen's consort, the rebellious males burst on stage, overturn the queen's throne, and take her captive. Her consort moves to center stage. He lifts his bloody sword over the heads of the courtiers. The queen's subjects, democracy, peace, justice, and the rest flee the scene in dismay, and man, for the first time in history, stands triumphant, dominating the stage as the curtain falls. That's a lot to unpack, my friends. That's a lot to unpack. So the further we go back into human history, the more we realize how everything we have today is just slowly degrading over time. Just look at our society now and compare it with societies such as Egypt, ancient Egypt, for example, or ancient Greece and Rome, for example, right? You would probably be able to argue that despite our actual literal technology, like our phones and stuff, our society is relatively very far behind than in terms of the arts, the sciences, the things like that. Some might argue that the sciences have never been better. I would like to offer you a particularly different type of perspective, in the sense that most of the science we have today is a very crude reimagining of real science. So there's that. And I think it's really important to understand that when you're happy, you're not a hater, and if you're hating, you're not happy. So moving along, the deterioration in the statues of women went hand in hand with the Dark Ages that followed this patriarchal revolution as it moved slowly westward from Near East, reaching Western Europe only in the 5th century of our era. In Europe and the British Isles, the last remnant of the great world civilization, the Celts, maintained the tradition of female supremacy until the fall of Rome, when waves of Germanic barbarians sweeping down from the northeastern forest met the surge of Oriental Christianity as it spread upward from the Mediterranean. Between these two milestones of masculism, the Celts were finally crushed. Yet even in defeat, they managed to preserve the guttering flame of civilization, for right while they were being annihilated by the barbarians, the Celts were civilizing them. The Celts held out against the invading savages until they had almost ceased to be savages. Baghdad batteries existed too. Yes, Archdragon, it talks about Baghdad in here. I don't know how close it is, but we do get there. Which is actually insane. Ancient Egypt had electricity. I'll die on this hill. You know what, bitch? I'm gonna die on that hill with you. Yet, let's see. Yet, despite the Celts, Teutonic Semitic patriarchy finally prevailed in Europe. Celtic culture was forgotten. The Celtic goddess religion went underground. Celtic customs and beliefs generated into pagan superstitions, and Celtic feminism was condemned as sinful by the patriarchal conquerors. The implicability with which Western man has since retaliated against women serves only to confirm the truth of her former dominance, a dominance that man felt compelled to stamp out and forget. What was this dark necessity, this envenomed misogyny that compelled man to tear down the hated sex, if not a form of retaliation, of compensation for his former condition of servitude, combined with a fear of woman's eventual resurgence to her former power? Hence the era we're in, the rise of the divine feminine, because women are remembering their power now. Is it not remarkable, asks Karen, that so little attention is paid to man's underlying fear and dread of women, and that his hatred should be overlooked even by its victim? The women themselves should even overlook it. Yet it is man's fear and dread of the hated sex that has made women's lot such a cruel one in the brave new masculine world. In frenzied insecurity of his fear of women, man has remade society after his own pattern of confusion and strife, and has created a world in which women is the outsider. He has rewritten history with the conscious purpose of ignoring, belittling, and ridiculing the great women of the past, just as modern historians and journalists seek to ignore, belittle, and ridicule the achievements of modern women. He has devalued women into an object of his basest physical desires, and has remade God in his own image, a God that does not love women. Worst of all, he has attempted to transform woman herself into a brainless, simulacrum, a robot who has to acquiesce meekly in the belief in her own inferiority. I heard some people say that dragons represent the divine feminine energy. What do you think? Yes, Dragon Blingy. Pickle Chips tells me that the highest form of a dragon is an awakened woman, and vice versa. I don't think that. I don't think men fear or hate women, says a man. All right, that's cute. All right, ready, set, go. So long has the myth of feminine inferiority prevailed that women themselves find it hard to believe that their own sex was once and for a very long time the superior and dominant sex. In order to restore women to their ancient dignity and pride, they must be taught their own history, as the African Americans are currently being taught theirs. We must repudiate 2,000 years of propaganda concerning the inferiority of women. Ooh, I'm gonna read that sentence again. We must repudiate 2,000 years of propaganda concerning the inferiority of women. Oh, I want to get that tattooed on my body. Okay, the Pope recently removed the age-old stigma of the Jewish people as quote-unquote Christ murderers, and the United States has sought by law to destigmatize the African Americans. But who has spoken for women? Who has stepped forward to remove God's curse from Eve? It seems evident that in times has come to put women back into the history books, and, as Mary Wollstonecraft suggested 200 years ago, to readmit her to the human race. Her contribution to civilization has been greater than man's, and man has overlooked her for long enough. Recorded history starts with a patriarchal revolution. Let it continue then with the matriarchal counter-revolution that is the only hope for the survival of the human race. Let me tell you something. The only reason why the world looks the way it does right now is because women are forgotten in their places of power. I'm not even advocating for women rule the world. I'm advocating for women to have a fucking seat at the table. Stop asking what we bring to the table and give us a fucking seat at it. Do you understand me? Like, we're here to go past a matriarchy or a patriarchy. Humanity has reached a point in time where it is about unifying all of us together. It's not about women are better than men. It's not about men are better than women. But we can't ignore our history, and we can't ignore the history that has been trying for thousands and thousands of years to be rewritten. So much of our power has been taken from us as women simply because of the words on the books that we're forced to read, the words on the books that men force each other to read and obeyed by. You know what I mean? Like, it's like we have to just be honest about that. Like, we have to be honest that, like, you know, women are powerhouses, women create life, and women are closer to God than anything. Like, and I don't care, like, who you are or what you believe, like, or how you identify as, but, like, the humans with uteruses are the closest we have to, like, God or divine or the spirit world. Why? Because they are the ones who create life. It doesn't matter how they identify. If they have a uterus, they are the ones closest to God. I don't care. Like, fucking crucify me, bitch. Like, I'm so sick and tired of people denying my innate powers, my innate wisdom, simply because of the organs I have in my body. It doesn't matter if I'm woman or not. It doesn't matter how I identify. The fact of the matter is my body's different than the man's body, and, like, I have been denied my power in every second of my life pretty much simply for trying to exercise that. And the only people who were really there to push me down were the men or the women who were doing it on behalf of men, because they were more afraid of the men than they were afraid of hurting me. And that's why I'm reading this book right now. You know what I mean? So I hope you understand where I'm coming from when I say it. The way I'm eating these words up, yeah, they're so needed. If they need to assert people over them, yes, they do. They feel threatened that they're not the strongest person in the room, in the world, in the universe. Yes, dragon, say it louder. Because men know that if women fully realize and remember, we will come at them with fury of 1,000 suns without mercy. Yes, I agree with you, Phoenix. Men have been threatened by women for thousands of years. Yes, assert power. Sorry, my bad. No, you are totally right. This is coming from a man, by the way. Other men are threatened by women. I have no clue. I love women, and I don't feel threatened by them at all. Nightmare Fuel Studios, this is exactly why we love you, because, like, the men who get offended by what I have to say are the men I'm talking about, because the men that don't give a shit and who resonate with what I have to say, they know, and they're not threatened by that. You want to know why? Because they're secure in themselves as an individual. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's certain powers that, like, people with melanin have that, like, I'll never know as a white person. That doesn't mean I don't have power of my own. Like, what? Like, this breaks my brain sometimes. Like, relax. Relax, people. Not all men, obviously. It's more the fact that society makes a big deal about men being strong, so their worth is tied to their strength. Yes, Dragon Blingy, and this book even talks about the men who are like very, very rare who are in tune with their intuition and can also tap into beyond the veil and pick up the same kind of information in the way that most women just naturally can. It's actually it's actually a really good sign of an extremely rare, highly evolved individual as a man if they are able to tap into those like powers, right? So that's why I have to say it. I've always thought it was goofy when guys feel threatened by strong women. It screams insecurities. Yeah, bro. Because, like, you know what? The strong men in my life, when I'm in my full power, you know what they do? They're obsessed with me. Like even if they're, like, just my friends, like, I have a lot of guy friends, and, like, even just my guy friends, when I literally show up in my power, they can't stop telling me how awesome it is. They're like, you're a badass, we love you, we can't get enough, like, tell us more, please, give us more, like, we love it. And then you know what, they're like, you know what, I'm so fucking inspired, like, I'm gonna go do shit now too, like, hell yeah. And then they'll come back and bring their art to me, and it's just this, like, mutual thing that's amazing, okay? Like, it's just chef's kiss. The problem is when people envy the other person's experience. Why do I need to envy the experience of a man when God made me a woman? Like, why would a man need to envy the experience of a woman when God made him a man? I mean, I guess that might be a little bit up for debate, you know, with the whole, like, but you know what? Actually, scratch that. It's not up for debate, because if you were born trans, like, God made you that way, okay? Like, I'm 100% gonna die on that hill, and, like, I am 100% gonna die on the hill that there is scientific evidence in your brain to back that up, too. I don't fucking care. Transphobic people are not allowed here, okay? I don't care. So don't misconstrue my words, okay? She decided that she doesn't need others' validation to feel strong and powerful because it comes from within. Yes. Azura, I follow a podcast called Eat Predators, hosted by Alexa Nicholas. She used to say believe survivors. She said she changed to power to survivors because, yes, she decided she doesn't need others' validation to feel strong. Yes, I love that. I'm definitely gonna check that out. I don't want this to sound pervy, but strong women excite me. I love strong women. I guess I'm wired different. No, Nightmare Fuel Studios, you're wild correctly. Because, like, all of the healthy, wealthy, and highly evolved men in my life, they are nothing but inspired by the strong women in their life, and all they want is to be just like them. You know what I mean? And, like, for all of the strong men in my life, they do the same for me. Like, all I want to do is work harder so I can be like them. Like, and that has nothing to do with gender. That just has to do with good human beings inspiring good human beings. And the problem is when people make it about men versus women, right? Like, that's the problem. But, like, at the same time, like, every single woman is suffering in our society today because, like, there's so much men. You know what I mean? Like, fuck you. Chill. Like, I don't, like, relax. Like, I'm talking about men as an institution, not, like, men as an individual, right? Like, I'm not talking about the man as an individual. I'm talking about men as an institution. So, moving forward, we have Prologue, the Lost Civilization. Nowhere in history do we find a beginning, but always a continuation. How then shall we understand the end if the beginning remains a mystery? J.J. Backhoffen. What a good quote. Only 100 years ago, the history of the world seemed very simple. If the creation of man had not, after all, taken place one sunny Friday morning in October of the year 404 BC, as had been pronounced by Bishop James Ussher, and widely believed before Charles Darwin, at least this new thing, evolution, had only recently produced man. It was firmly believed that the world was young and the human race far younger, that civilization had progressed predictably and smoothly from savagery to its 19th century state of near perfection, and that man, the male of the human species, that is, was indeed the focal point of the universe and the lord of all creation. If man had evolved from savagery by a slow but steady ascent, as Darwin and Thomas Huxley said he had, so too had society. There had been and could be no turning back, onward and upward. Was the cry. Civilization was believed to have started in the Nile Valley around 2500 BC, before which date men had lived in caves as semi-brutes. Historians merely smiled at Manetho's claim at the history of Egypt extended back 17,000 years before his own time, or nearly 20,000 years before Darwin. This, of course, said that Victorians was impossible, since man had not even appeared on Earth at so early a date. Now we know that man has been on Earth for more than a million years, that the history of Egypt actually did reach back as far as Manetho said, that the great civilization, the Sumerian, preceded the civilization of Egypt, and that is more than likely that an even greater civilization preceded that of Sumer. The deeper the archaeologist, can I speak? The deeper the archaeologist, no, I can't speak, dig, the further back go the origins of man and society, and the less sure we are that civilization has followed the steady upward course so thoroughly believed by the Victorians, it is more likely that the greatest civilization of the past have yet to be discovered. A study of the rise and fall of known civilization hints strongly at a great worldwide civilization preceding the Dark Ages, which we call prehistory. What the heck? Prehistory? That's such an interesting word. A term that is rapidly losing its meaning through the testimony of the spade. We know that the Dark Age in Europe followed the destruction of the great Greco-Celto-Roman civilization in the 5th century AD, that a Dark Age in the Aegean followed the destruction of the great Minoan Mycenaean civilization of Greek around 1000 BC, and that a Dark Age in the Near East followed the destruction by the pastoral Semites of the great matriarchal city-states of Sumer around 2500 BC. So we have the tail end of what seems to be a rhythm running throughout history, with a great universal civilization rising and falling about every 1500 years. What then of the so-called Dark Age that preceded the civilization of Sumer? Could it have been preceded by an even greater civilization that ended before the dawn of written history? Evidence of this earlier civilization is piling up rapidly. Where it originated is a moot question, but what it was worldwide can hardly be doubted in light of recent evidence. What is the male institution good at? War and division? Yeah, no thanks. Nightmare Fuel Studios, I love you so much. I hope you know I love you so much. As an African-American woman, the power and truth of a person doesn't come from the outside skin, but on the inside. You are strong and powerful because it's your God-given right. You have it inherent. Exactly, Phoenix. So much love to you for sharing that with us as somebody who has melanin in their skin, because I don't have that perspective. And like, there's a lot of like people who are trying to stoke a race war against, like, you know, white people are superior, no, black people are superior, you know, no, whoever is better than whoever. And it's just like, you guys, like, the whole point is to be so different. So different. The hell? Thank you for reminding me I need water though, dragon. Honestly. Hold on, I just gotta get like all cozy because I'm like actually so freaking cold, and I hate like redoing my blankets. Hold on. I really do. It's like really annoying to me. Let's see. I don't want this to sound, oh yeah, no, I read that already. Just want to make sure I'm caught up with the chat. You're really good at reading out loud. Dude, I love reading out loud. I used to like be the person who exclusively read aloud in my classes because no one could read like me. I don't know why, man. I still am dyslexic though. I try to spell, I fuck that shit up. I'm pretty good at reading in almost any language. Like if I know phonetically how like the language like works, I can read Spanish really well, but I don't necessarily know what I'm saying, but I could probably pronounce it quite well. Also because I had a Spanish teacher in high school who was very militant about the way I pronounced things, so that's probably right. It's actually hot as hell where I am too. I'm just inside a house with AC and I'm very grateful. So that's why I'm wrapped up in a blanket. But I digress. Let's break back into this. So this part of the book is when I really started losing my mind a little bit, because this is crazy. It's crazy, Nightmare, that you're bringing up runes, because I'm about to blow your mind with runes. Learning runes has made my dyslexia worse because now I mistake certain runes and letters for each other. Oh my gosh. You know, I wonder if I get the same way sometimes. I've got dyscalculia, so math is the issue for me. No, that's totally fine. I totally understand. I love to read out loud. I can't take in the information if I read in my head. Honestly, Dragon, That might be why I like reading out loud too. If you're really good at languages, it means you got a good ear. Ooh. Fun fact, I'm actually really good at hearing pitch too, so that's why like my first experience with like psychic senses was clairaudience, I'm pretty sure, and I've worked really hard on like developing my clairaudience more than any of my other like clair senses, but I digress. Let's jump into this evidence of language. Speaking of you with these languages, it says the evidence of language. If man has grown steadily more civilized, more intelligent, and more complex through evolution, why has his language undergone an evolution in reverse? Oh, this one blew me away, you guys. This one fucking ruined me. It is obvious that the languages of today are far less complex than the classical language. The philologists tell us that Latin, Greek, and Sanskrit are less complex than the common Indo-European language from which they all evolved. If these dead languages are a maze of case endings, declensions, and conjugations that make the learning of them so difficult for modern students, the original language was an even more difficult maze. Yet few laymen seem to be worried by the discrepancy in the fact of this highly sophisticated original language on the one hand, and the widespread belief on the other hand that early man communicated by grunts. That's what you would say. I remember learning that shit in school. Like, what the fuck? How can we reconcile the fact that complex Latin languages, for example, is a simplification of an earlier prehistoric language, with the prevalent belief that language evolved through onomatopoeia, a sort of baby talk composed of imitative sounds? The two are utterly reconcilable. Bingo. No. Yeah. Yeah, being a singer or musician helps you develop a good ear because it forces you to develop your clairaudience. You're absolutely correct, my friend. You are so right. I hear too much noises I don't want to hear. It's impossible for me not to. Yeah, dude, I feel you deeply on that. I feel you deeply, Phoenix, on that one. So where then did the original common language come from, and who invented it? Certainly not the familiar caveman, complete with club and bearskin of popular imagery. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, 250 years ago, wrote, "I am so convinced of the impossibility that languages should owe their original institution to merely human means that I leave the problem to anyone who will undertake to solve it." Rousseau, of course, pictured our ancestors very much as we picture them. In fact, the popular image of the caveman owes its origin in part to Rousseau himself and his noble savage concept. And of course, he could not conceive of this savage as the inventor of language. The problem stumped him. And it would stump us too if we did not know that mankind is far, far older than Rousseau thought. Yeah, I'm a musician and it can sharpen your senses with all sounds. Hells yeah. Have you tried noise canceling earphones, headphones? I literally have some in my room right now. I need them so much. Being a metalhead, I've destroyed my hearing. You know what? I'm very lucky that growing up my dad was pretty adamant on me wearing earplugs. And I've tried to pretty much keep that no matter what. Because he like completely ruined his hearing. He's like, we don't do that to you. So thanks, Dad. You're the boss. George Wilhelm Hegel in Reason and History writes, "It is a fact of philological evidence that the language man spoke in his early rude condition was highly elaborate, and a comprehensive, consistent grammar is the work of thought. How could rude, or in this context, that means rough, ignorant, uncouth, uneducated, or uncivilized, so how could rude ancestors have worked out a comprehensive, consistent, and highly elaborate grammar? If they could do that, they could not have been so terribly rude, or terribly rough, ignorant, uncouth, uneducated, and uncivilized. And if they were rude, who worked out their grammar for them?" Theodore Mommsen writes that language is the true image and organ of the degree of civilization attained, and acknowledges that the rude Indo-Europeans, before they had divided into classical and modern nations of Europe and Asia, had a very extensive vocabulary. That's why Pickle Chips makes fun of me all the time, saying, how can you be smart in a stupid language? I get it now. Because how many, if this is true with the languages, and if you know the Sumerian text and the story of Babel and the Tower of Babel, we all spoke the same language, and we all built a tower to try and reach God, and then God struck that tower down and scattered man all over earth and gave us all different languages to make it harder for us to connect with each other. That means all of our languages are derivated from that one original divine language that God took from us. If you subscribe to that. This is just my perspective. Welcome to my channel. This is just what I do in my free time. I read shit and I just ponder to myself and I meditate and I ask my dragon guardians, and then I'll pull like tarot cards, and then I'll cross-reference, and then I'll research. But I'm just doing part of this with you guys. You know? Just doing it with you guys this time. So let's see. Yes, I'm trying to find ones that are perfect for me because some are too expensive or not good enough. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm clairaudient and I like to write down song lyrics that I hear in my head, put them in a box, fish them out, and use them as divination messages. Dragon, you are a genius. Oh my gosh. Violet Maze, welcome back to your Daily Dose of Dragon Feather. I watched a light language transmission for addiction and joined in as best I could for a beginner, and I puked almost immediately because I was detoxifying as former smoker of 9 years. Just got through 24 hours without smoking nicotine. You know, I know that light language gets some weird woo-woo rap on stuff, and like sometimes it even like sketches me out a little bit, but like honestly, I have really just heard nothing but good things about it. And my engagement with light language here and there, while it's initially off-putting to me, if I really just surrender to the experience of it, it actually is quite awesome. And like, I would love to make light language content, but I'm not gonna lie to you guys, like the type of like job that I have in like the music industry, if like videos of me got out of light language, like in that context, it might just be really bad for the career. So it might be interesting for me to just make songs with light language instead, because I could stream that shit on Spotify, okay? You know what I mean? But anyway, clairaudience is the strongest of the clair for me. It has been helpful at times, but has made me question a few things. Yes, same. Have you looked at the Sumerian alphabet? That's beyond complex. Yes. It mentions that in here as well. I love that words aren't needed in languages that you can communicate in so many ways. None are more stupid than another. Yeah, exactly. But let's see. Where was I? The conclusion can be drawn that either our rude ancestor did not invent their own language, or that they were not so rude and uncouth as we are today, meaning that we've like de-evolved in terms of our languages. When simple English grammar is beyond the grasp of the majority of Americans. Ooh, can I read that again, please? The conclusion to be drawn is that either our rude ancestors did not invent their own language, or that they were not so rude and uncouth as we are today. When simple English grammar is beyond the grasp of the majority of Americans. I try to keep a positive attitude in this world, but that sentence destroyed me. That sentence destroyed me. That sentence, as an American white woman, destroyed me. Because guess the fuck what? English grammar is absolutely beyond the grasp of most average Americans. An interesting fact about this original language is that it seems to have been born in a subarctic locale, since the oldest root words common to all its descendants refer to northern latitudes: reindeer, spruce, snow, fir, etc. This curious fact seems to contradict the evidence that our present civilization itself originated in the mountain plains of southeastern Europe and Anatolia. These two contradictory assumptions could be reconciled if one adopted the cataclysmic theory, or the theory of the shifting of the poles as advanced by Immanuel Veliskosovsky. Oh, I gotta brush up on that language. Lou Brown and others. Then the plains of Anatolia could once have been subarctic, and the subtropical fauna excavated in recent years beneath the Arctic ice could have been grazing in a tropical jungle at the time of some world cataclysm. So, songs with light languages. Thanks, Azura. Hell yeah. Have you heard of the Gynocratic manuscript? No, but I definitely have to look. Here, I'm going to take a screenshot of that because I definitely have to look into that. Have you looked at the Sumerian? Yes, I have. I love the words. All right, good. We're caught up. All right, so it says, let's see. It says Pythagoras in the 6th century BC taught the theory of the shifting of the poles, attributing the belief to the Egyptians and the ancient people of India. These people also spoke of ancient race of red men, red-haired, who had ruled the world from a now submerged continent prior to the last but one cataclysmic shifting of the poles, which they placed in the 10th millennium BC, and of a later cataclysm 5 millennia later, about the time of the submergence of the Antarctic continent and of the floods of myth and legend. Okay, because these giant, yes, we're about to talk about Atlantis, Phoenix. Are you fucking ready? The philosophical fact of the original language is borne out in myth. The Bible, Genesis 2, says that the whole earth was of one language and one speech. Flavius Joseph says that all creatures had one language at the time, implying that the beasts also spoke. Louis Ginzberg said that language came down from above, complete with an alphabet for writing. I'm covered in chills. The Sumerians believed that language and all the arts of civilization were bestowed upon them by a mysterious creature, half human and half fish. Let me cook, who emerged from the sea and later returned to it. Looking at this legend, the distinguished exobiologist and space physicist Carl Sagan suggests that this sea creature may have been a visitor from space. That leads to an alt-right pipeline, just so you know. But that is another story. Thank you, book. What interests us here is the worldwide tradition of a once common language, a tradition found not only in the Mediterranean region and in Europe, but in Asia, Africa, and the Western Hemisphere. It is accompanied by indications of a common source not only for language, but for all the arts and the practices of civilization. That this common source antedates the Egyptian and even the Sumerian civilization is now accepted. Historians before the discovery of Sumer marveled that Egyptian civilization seemed to have sprung full-blown without benefit of a barbaric prehistory. Now it seems equally remarkable that the Sumerian civilization seems to have done the same. Obviously then, there is something behind Sumer too, to account for its apparently sudden achievement of civilization at the very dawn of recorded history. Indeed, it may well be as S.R.K. Gallenvile said that the science we see at the dawn of history was not science at its dawn, but represents the remnants of the science of some great and as yet untraced civilization of the past. We're about to get into Atlantis. I just need to take a break because this is just, I have so much to say. I'm gonna cry. This book is my Bible. I don't know what to say. You need to look at it. Long story short, it's a book written in a language nobody knows, so it can't be translated. It's also full of astrology symbols, pictures of herbs, and goddess imagery. Nightmare Fuel Studios. Yeah, can we just, like, to anyone who ever says men are trash, can we please just take a moment to appreciate that a man told me that? I hate the whole man versus woman thing, so I'm always going to take a moment to, like, debunk it whenever I notice it. The writing on the ring of the Lord of the Rings is inspired by the unknown language in the Gynocratic manuscript. Hells yeah. Absolutely, not every barbaric civilization needs saving. Yes, yes. Okay, evidence of the maps. Civilization, according to H.J. Massingham, was consciously planted around the world by a people called the Ancient Mariners, tentatively identified with the seafaring people of Crete. Writing in the early years of this century, Massingham was daring enough in his attribution of world travel to a people of the 3rd millennium BC. But now we know that the ancient mariners belong to an even more remote period in history than the Massingham assumed. For incredible as it may seem, these ancient mariners drew an accurate map of a continent, Antarctica, that disappeared under 3 miles of solid ice at least 6,000 years ago, and whose very existence was unknown to modern man until after death 1820, so modern day 1820. Modern scientific instruments have affirmed that the continent of Antarctica became glaciarized no later than 4000 BC, and that it has lain under an impenetrable mountain of ice ever since. This fact, plus the probability that Antarctica lay in temperate latitudes prior to 4000 BC, combined with the further fact that tremendous coal deposits have been detected there, indicating forest growth, leads to the incredible thought that Antarctica must have been mapped by an Antarctician prior to its glaciarization 6,000 years ago. Was this Antarctic cartographer an Atlantean? And was the vast continent of Antarctica once the vast continent of Atlantis? I love this book. Bitch, I love this book. I love this book. Okay, I'm gonna cry. I am fully committed to reading this whole book on my channel. I hope you know that. Like, I'm so committed to reading this book, I might stay live the entire time I'm reading this damn book. Even if I have to take potty breaks, okay? Like a little doggy, okay? This book is so important to me. You don't even understand how magical this book came into my life. I literally essentially asked my entire spirit team for a sign, and like it came to me in the form of this fucking book today. Holy fuck me. Anyway, a map drawn by Orontes Phineas in AD 1532 from an ancient map now lost delineates the coastline and rivers of the lost continent of Antarctica with such accuracy as to coincide almost exactly with modern maps drawn with the assistance of highly sophisticated instruments through the masses of ice that now obscure these coastlines and rivers. The Orontes Phineas map is presumed to be based upon the same map on which the now famous Prehistory map is based. When the letter map dated 1513 was discovered in 1929, modern cartographers could not believe it was the work of either medieval or ancient map makers. It was far too accurate to have been made without certain instruments that were not even invented until centuries later. I forgot what's the book name and the author. I need it. No, honestly. This book is called The First Sex by Elizabeth Gould Davis. And it was printed in 1971 by, holy shit, it's Library of Congress catalog, number card 79-150582, printed in the United States of America. This book, published the same day in published on the same day in Canada by Longmans Canada Limited, Toronto. Everything I love is somehow Canadian too. Go subscribe to Adilcy Music. He's my boyfriend and he's also Canadian. Anyway, I'm being blown away by this. Okay, so we're going back. Has close ties to Atlantis? No, literally, like. Antarctica might be a frozen Atlantis. Might. Keyword is might. We're just reading a book. I don't know how real this book is. It is kind of old, but it's just to share. I love this book a lot. It's just lets me think, it gives me lots of opportunities to dive into rabbit holes. Anyway, and we continue. So in the 1930s and 1940s, other maps of the 13th to 16th centuries continued to turn up, confounding modern science by their precision. The odd thing about these maps was that on them, the unexplored regions of the medieval world were more accurately drawn than the parts which had actually been explored in ancient or medieval times. For example, Mercator's later maps, in which had been incorporated parts of the world mapped by Ptolemy, and later geographers were less accurate than his earlier map based entirely on how lost map of remotest antiquity. In one of these medieval world maps, the Pacific coastline of the Americas looks exactly as it does in modern atlases, yet no part of this coast had ever been so much as dreamed of in the Middle Ages. Even Columbus was unaware of the Pacific Ocean. And we know that because, hello, Christopher Columbus thought that America was India. Hence why we have the Indian racist slur towards Native American people. This is why I don't give a shit whoever says that their practice like doesn't have to be like anti-racist or doesn't have to be historically informed or doesn't have to be in service of the community, in service of humanity, are absolutely shitting themselves and are absolutely kidding themselves about their practice. Like, it's one thing to start and to learn and to focus on your own bubble before you get to a point to where you can help others. But let's be so for real. If you don't think your guardians, if you don't think your spirit team, if you don't think your magic is here to be a benefit to life, then it wouldn't exist, because like that's what matters here on planet Earth. Like the only reason why like shit exists is because it's a benefit to life. And I know it might seem like a hot take, but all the bullshit and the patriarchy is also a benefit to life, because the cool thing about Earth is that like it's a world of polarity, and we have to go to the darkest, the deepest, darkest depths that are so dense and heavy parts of humanity before we can bounce back and really reach our greatest heights. And I swear to you guys, these dark ages that we are emerging from is literally the fuel that we need to reach humanity's apex again, like, in a way that's not like we've ever been, a true evolution, if you will. But forget what I have to say, let's read the book. Let's see. The mystery of the maps was eventually explained. The original ancient map of unknown origin had been rescued by the Christians when they burned the great library at Alexandria in Egypt in the 5th century and had been taken to Constantinople. There it had lain until the Crusade of the 13th century, during which the Venetian fleet attacked Constantinople and carried off the map with other loot to Venice, where contemporary cartographers saw and used it. Where it ultimately disappeared to is unknown. When Gibbon in the 18th century said of the Byzantium and the great Byzantine civilization that it saved not a single work of history or philosophy or literature from oblivion, he did not, of course, know of this one piece of parchment so fortuitously saved. The ancient map, which had been copied and recopied through countless millennia until it ended in Byzantium, and yet this one map had thrown more light on prehistory and revealed more of the ancient civilization that produced it than have all the archaeologists, historians, and theorists of all the ages since. Who were these ancient mariners who sailed the 7 seas 10,000 years before the Christian era? Who were they who mapped the world with an accuracy never again achieved until the 20th century of the present era? Whoever they were, there can be no doubt that their scientific knowledge was equal to our own. And certainly they had ocean-going, far-ranging ships that were capable of sailing around the globe. They traveled not only up and down our own Pacific coast, which they mapped quite thoroughly and accurately, but they also visited the Arctic Circle, the Antarctic, Africa, Australia, and the islands of Oceania, as we shall see. So that's insane. And if you ask me, it sounds like some survivors of Atlantis had to go around the world and pass on the knowledge that was lost before humans were just never gonna be anything more. Your voice is calming when you read. Thank you, Paper Girl Jaws. Welcome back to your daily dose of Dragon Feather. I will not be satisfied until I find out what that large metal looking thing is on that. That's on Antarctica. We have satellite images, but it's too far away to send a drone over it. Damn. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, it's really fascinating to just wonder. Like, this is why I'm like, I have to talk about it with you guys, because if I try to like share stuff like this with the people in my life, like they're just like, nah. They're normally not interested. Tiamat from Marvel, LOL. Phoenix, Tiamat, we're about to get into Tiamat. That's the only reason why I even brought this book on the channel, because like, hello, Dragon channel, we only really focus on the passion of dragons. I'm obsessed. So like, when it started talking about like how all of, I'm not gonna spoil the book. Okay. Okay. Don't want to spoil the book. Okay. So let's see. So the ancient mariners, ready? True. True. Like we're talking about the creation of humanity in the world, and you're not gonna find dragons at the center of that? Come on, man. Come on, man. Like, you can't. Okay. I'm too passionate about this, okay? I've gotta calm down a little bit. Hey, hi, hello. What's today's live about? Christy, it wouldn't be the same without you. Welcome back to your Daily Dose of Dragon Feather. Okay, so this is a book that has miraculously found its way into my life today. Just the whole magic of this all. You're definitely gonna have to go back and rewatch it, but we are reading a book called The First Sex by Elizabeth Gould Davis, and it essentially started talking, like, I would only do a live about this and read the book with you guys, because it started talking about how the origin of God is actually like a dragon fairy witch woman, like a dragon fairy witchy woman. Like, we're unpacking it, man, together. So hope you're enjoying it. This book talks about Tiamat. Yes, dragon. Yes, dragon. Blingy. I can't stop trying to say your name. It's actually kind of a vocal stim at this point. Anyway, the ancient mariners. Whoever these ancient mariners may have been, they probably account for the wonderful stranger tradition among so many of the world's primitive peoples. Massingham points out that people in the most unlikely places, from the Arctic to Australia to the ocean islands, have or once had customs and traditions that they themselves can no longer account for, and which seem to serve for no purpose in their lives. Among such traces of the passage of the wonderful stranger were the wearing of a shell imitation overlapping plate armor by the peaceful Eskimos, the mummification of the dead by the natives of the Torres Strait in Australia, a custom which could not have been borrowed from Egypt, as the Egyptians were notoriously timid of the sea and of sea travel, the widespread custom of polishing flint instruments, a process that served no useful purpose, and must have been done only to imitate the high polish of the metal instruments used by the wonderful strangers, and, above all, the great megalithic monuments scattered over the face of the globe. The Kilroy was here of the ancient mariners. Other remnants of a forgotten influence among savage peoples that surprised and mystified the explorers of a much later age were the apparently meaningless moral taboos, such as incest and blood taboos observed by otherwise amoral primitives, and the prevalence of, I actually might not be able to read some of this, of phallic mutilation, the origins of which customs will be discussed later. Among these primitive peoples, from Yucatan to Tasmania, the wonderful stranger tradition involved a blue-eyed, golden, or red-haired race of people. We're kind of getting into some potentially alt-right racist theories, just to be like a trigger warning to some of you guys. So it says, this in of itself would seem to eliminate the ancient Cretans, for they, like all the Mediterranean race who founded the civilization that we know, were a smallish, slim, neatly built people with dark hair, white skin, small straight noses, and longish heads, as we see from their ancient carvings and portraits from Sumer, Egypt, and Crete. They were non-Semitic and non-Aryan, and nobody knows where they came from or into what modern race they disappeared. It is interesting to note that the Egyptians, members of this dark-haired Mediterranean race, in historical times sourced Europe and Asia for redheads to serve their goddess temples. Could this demand for red-haired people have been prompted by the Egyptians' dimming memory of a long-lost super race who had once taught them the arts of civilization? No. That's not right. Just so you know, it's kind of racist. And could the connection taught them that the arts of civilization? Oh, and could the connection with the goddess temple have been a reflection of the religion with the lost civilization, which had bequeathed goddess worship and the Egyptians as it had to all the Mediterranean and early Indo-European peoples, and to the Semites as well? And if so, who were the golden strangers? Racists, thank you. Among known races, red hair appears only among the Celts of Europe. I'm pretty sure there's black people with red hair. I don't know, this book is kind of old too. I'm just trying to like use my discernment as I read this in English, and I have dragons laughing at me while I'm trying. It's a lot. Okay, Terence Powell says that the Celts were remarkable to Mediterranean eyes for their height, their fair skin, blue eyes, and blonde hair. Could the Celts we know of, the golden strangers of prehistoric Britain, and the tall, fair race, red blonde of hair, of Ireland have been the last survivors of that ancient unknown civilization, which even to them was but a faint half memory kept alive by a tradition they no longer understood? What do you guys think? What is your religion? Paka Paka, welcome to your daily dose of dragon feather. I am a draconic witch who believes in God. It gets me in a lot of trouble for some reason, but I talk to dragons and they tell me to believe in God. So, Paka Paka, you tell me what that makes my religion. Ironically, you're dragon faking. This book was meant to find you, dude. Cry. Dragon Blitchy, you don't even know. Like, as I was reading this, I was literally crying because like I was just like, tears were starting to fall down my face, and I was just like, I have to read this to the hatchlings, because the best part is, it's like, not only are there dragons in here, but there's history in here, there's Celtic mythology in here, there's literally Druidry in here, we're about to talk about it, Tiamat's in here, I haven't even read all of it, like I haven't even gotten that far in here, there's Christianity in here, there's like some angry man who had the book before me and like scribbled all around the book with how mad he was about the literature. Ooh, it's perfect. And then, bro, it gets racist, and I'm already being nice with how I'm translating some of the words in here. Like, it does not say African American in this book, and you don't need to know what it actually says. You know what I mean? So, like, yeah. So, interesting. So, who is the red-haired race that taught them stuff? Are they human? It's insinuating that there's, like there was a Celtic like ancestor that was like supposed to be the super race potentially. So do they know basically they saw beauty and went, they must be maybe God or ethereal? Like, honestly, like, come on, man. So some of this, don't take this seriously. You could honestly not take any of this like seriously if you really want to, but I just feel like it's worth the read because of just all of the crazy cross references and connections it draws through everything that I just love in my life. It's just a really provoking read. So I'm obsessed with it. And it was literally decorative, not sold. They didn't sell this. It's like a haggle thing. You know, I'll buy something. Can I take this with me? You know, okay. It's really strange, honestly. Let's see. So yeah, the dreaded A word, exactly. It's pretty bad. I love watching you read this and discussing this. It's honestly necessary because I don't know how to understand this by myself. It's too much. It's too much. We have to do it together. Okay, let's see. Okay, this in itself would seem to eliminate the ancient Cretans, for they, like all the quote-unquote Mediterranean race who found the civilization that we know, were as smallish, slim. Okay, I just already read that. Okay. It is interesting to note that the Egyptians, membered of this dark-haired Mediterranean race, I think I already read that. Okay, hold on. I'm really sorry. I'm just looking for my place. Okay. For Herodotus tells us that their sacred relics were a plow, a yoke, an axe, and a drinking cup, all of purest gold. They guard these sacred relics with most special care, says Herodotus, and offer annual sacrifices in their honor. They say that these relics fell from the sky 1,000 years before Darius, which actually does check out because all of the like just with the business that I do, I work with a lot of industries to help their businesses grow. And all the scientists that I know and have talked to and like worked with say that gold doesn't come from Earth. It comes from space. God's magic, bro. Your name is perfect for this live stream. Welcome back to your daily dose of Dragon Feather. So it says, let's see. All of these relics are symbols of matriarchy. The plow and the yoke symbolizes, respectively, the invention of agriculture and the domestication of animals, both traditionally attributed to the women of the matriarchal age. The axe is the primordial symbol of the matriarchal civilization which culminated in Crete, where the double axe had a very special significance, and the drinking cup was a sacred emblem in the ancient goddess rites that survived in Argos and Aegina, even in the Herodotus day and in Ireland as late as the 2nd century AD. Oh my goodness, it's crazy, crazy. If I understand correctly, okay. We love Druids here. Dude, we're obsessed with Druidry. I think we're about to get into the Druidry stuff too. I'm really excited. Let's see. It says, the sacred yoke of Herodotus report may have evolved into the golden torque of the later Celts, a Celtic adornment that has been identified by R.E.M. Wheeler with other sacred emblems of the ancient Aegean. All these relics were of purest gold. Gold was a precious metal in Herodotus's day, 1,000 years before Darius, and here 1,000 years only means a very long time. Gold, like all metals, was scarce. However, the ancient mariners were metal workers, and that they mined the world for gold. Gold is attested by the remains of their worked mines from England to Thrace, from Serbia to Rhodesia. Among the enigmas of classical Greek world were the worked gold mines of Thrace, discovered in the 5th century BC. Moreover, gold was a word of the original Indo-European language. Interesting. Yes, if I may, I can share some info for you that God and Jesus, the Holy Trinity, is magical. I would love to know. I love learning about Druids so much. Druids and Norse shamans inspire me so much. You're gonna love this, Nightmare. This is literally like right up your alley then. Let's see. It says, another story states that the ancestors of the Celts came from an island near Gades, Cadiz on the Atlantic coast of Spain, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, or Gibraltar, upon the ocean, the Atlantic. Could this island have been Atlantis? Could Atlantis have been the home of the ancient mariners? Herodotus goes on to say that according to this account, the mother of the Scythians was queen and sole mistress of the island, unquote. A strange thing about this story is that the description of the mermaid-like queen fits the description of the strange sea creature who brought the arts of civilization to the Sumerians. Whoo, covered in chills. Before leaving the ancient mariners, it is interesting to note a few casually collected evidences of an ancient seafaring civilization of several millennia ago. These are from actual newspaper reports collected by the indefatigable clipper of newspapers, Charles Fort. So here's a couple of excerpts. London Times, June 22nd, 1884. A worked gold thread was found embedded in stone 8 feet deep in a stone quarry below Rutherford Mills on River Tweed. A perfectly formed cut iron nail with a perfect head found embedded in a piece of auriferous quartz in California, no date given. A nail found in the 9-inch thick block of stone from King Goody Quarry, North Britain, 1845. Another nail in quartz crystal in Carson, Nevada, in 1884. A crystal lens, not an ornament, but a true optical lens, apparently ground by modern methods, said British Scientific Association Journal, found buried in a house at Nineveh, it's Nineveh, during excavations in 1871. British Scientific Association finds it impossible to accept that crystal lenses had ever been made by the ancients, adds Fort. Crystal lenses. I have a damn video on my channel named Crystal Lens. that I just pulled out of my asshole in a meditation for naming a video that was like a creative modeling thing with some friends. And let me tell you something. It was about reclaiming our feminine power. And let me tell you something else. This whole book is about the first sex being women and how we have to really go back hella deep to see. And I think the truth is that what predates Sumeria and Babylon and all of that we're talking about is Atlantis, and that literally Atlantis was probably run by women, and they don't want us to know that. They don't want us to know that. No, they don't. Okay, anyway. Where the hell am I? Okay, ready, set, go. It says, where then did the evidences of technological civilization come from? Found as they all were in places where they could not have been deposited within the past 10,000 years. Whoa, so interesting. I know, I'm so messed up right now. I'm so messed up. I meant water fairies. We're getting so close to water fairies, because this book essentially insinuates that water fairy mermaids are dragons and I can't breathe. So I know that might sound like a spoiler, but trust me, this whole video, if you came from Instagram, that was the spoiler. But anyway, I digress. It says, we are a long way from knowing who the ancient mariners were. I don't know about that. But it is only through conjecture, analysis, and synthesis that we are ever likely to find out. And the analysis and synthesis of myth, primitive customs, archaeological evidence, and language lead to the conjecture that the lost civilization of the ancient mariners was a woman's civilization. I just saw someone asking what book this is. If you are new here, welcome back to your Daily Dose of Dragon Feather. We are learning about The First Sex, written by Elizabeth Gould Davis. This was published in 1971, and it's kind of blowing my mind. I would not have talked about this book if it didn't talk about dragons. So we're almost there. The dragon stuff is so good. So please, I will probably be obsessed with this book for another hour at the very least on this channel. So welcome. Anyway, it says, the elder world was full of memories and myths of such a lost civilization, a civilization prior to those of Egypt and Sumer, not a merely barbaric precursor of them, but an ancient culture of superior status, from which they derived, and from which their civilizations had, in many respects, degenerated. Degenerated. And with the rise and fall of each nation, the civilization that comes after it is a further degeneration from the original. Same with our languages. That's why English is the stupidest language. Linguistically, it's hard for anyone who doesn't speak it to learn it. If English is not your native tongue, it gives you hell trying to learn it. And if English is your native tongue, it gives you hell trying to learn any other language. Because it's the colonizer's language. The capitalist's language. Thank God this book's in English so I can read it. Subscribe. I'm having a great time. Anyway, I hope you guys are having a great time. Plato's ideal republic was more a looking back at this former glory than a looking forward. In Critias, I think that's how you say it, he had spoken of the former primacy of the goddess and of the equality of men and women in ancient times. In the Republic, he envisions a similar ideal world where only excellence of intellect will be the criterion for leadership, and where women will have all the advantages of education and all of the opportunities for advancement available to men as well. Public offices are to be held by women as well as men, as was the way of the ancients. That's what Plato wanted. In the chronicles of all people's tales of an elder race universally point to a fixed belief in the prior existence of a culture of undoubted antiquity and excellence. This regime of the elder world was regarded as ending in cataclysm, and it is invariably spoken of having existed at a period so remote that only the broad outlines of its history have survived in tradition. For when cataclysm strikes, as Plato says in the Timaeus, it leaves only those who are deficient in letters and education, and then we have to begin all over again as children and know nothing of what happened in ancient times. That is something that Pickle Chips told me when, like, the end of civilization is essentially planned and carried out, and it's very intentional. The ones who carry out the ending of a civilization keep the knowledge, hide the rest, destroy what they don't want, and then the rest of humanity has to start over again. And it's in a degenerate form because they don't have what they have. And the fact that we're here where we are in Azura Dragonfeathers talking to you about this right now in 2024 is actually a fucking miracle and a literal proof that magic is real. I don't even know how to tell you guys how this book ended up in my life. Let me just say it was by magic itself, because that's actually, like, just the series of events that had to happen for this to end up in my hands today was just insane. Insane. Okay. Here we go. It says, sorry, I'm just trying to learn. Trying to find where I left off. Okay, the survivors of each destruction, he continues in Cretus, were ignorant of the art of writing and remembered only the names of their former chiefs and a little about their deeds. For many generations, the survivor directed their attention to the supplying of their needs, to the neglect of events that had happened in times long past, for inquiry into antiquity, and introduced only with leisure, and when the necessaries of life are beginning to be provided, but not before. So basically, humanity as a society can't start thinking about anything beyond, like we can't inquire about antiquity unless we have all of our needs being met, which is why I say, like, the only reason why I'm able to have such a deep conversation with you about these kinds of philosophical topics is because all of my needs are being met in a way where I have no fear to talk about these things. You know what I mean? Like, and some people are going through so many of their own things in their life that trying to comprehend certain types of, like, philosophical thought process or processes is actually harmful and is an insult, and it completely dismisses the realities of some people's systemic injustices. And that's why I think people who have a spiritual practice, who aren't actively anti-racist, who aren't actively decolonizing, who aren't actively looking for the history of where their practices come from, are foolish and don't know what they're practicing. They're part of New Age blindness, if you will, like part of the New Age movement that's just literally colonized spirituality, and it breaks my heart because I feel like I have just watched it develop and get worse over time. And I used to want, like, everybody to share their experience with witchcraft, and now that shit scares the hell out of me because it's like so many people are considering certain things witchcraft, like certain things working with gods and goddesses, certain things working with dragons or whatever the hell, and they have no idea what they're talking about. And it's just like, because we live in a society that has degenerated so many times from the literal, like, original, like, formula, if that makes sense. According to this lens, I'm just reading the book and trying to process it and think about it critically through the knowledge that I have. Does that mean I believe these things? Who knows? Probably not right away, but I'll have to think about it. History is told by the winner, not who lost. Exactly, Phoenix. I wonder when the last time we got reset, and was it all humanity or just certain cultures? I'm pretty sure the Roman Empire was the last great society that was reset, which is why so many men today will be like, that's my Roman Empire, like whatever that, like, trend, you know what I'm talking about? Because, like, that is, like, the pinnacle of, like, you know, men leading society in the way that we want to today, right? Like, essentially speaking, I'm speaking very generally in a way, like, not necessarily, like, factually based, like, more like archetypally, conceptually based in the context of like the history that I'm reading. Because this book, throughout the book, has all sorts of footnotes that reference all the books that they're pulling the information from. So there's a whole catalog in the back of this book to basically read about all of the different things that this book references. And that is what really got me good for this book, because that is like really hard to find, especially in modern books. They just don't write, like books that I buy about witchcraft and the history of like humanity in modern day that have been made like in the 2000s or onward, they just don't hit the way that like the books from the 1900s do, if that makes sense. Roman renaming Greek gods, current law system. I always wondered, where did Roman come from? Just bulldoze over. Yeah, so it was like basically Greek, and then like Roman, and then like Egyptian, and then like Sumerian, and then I think Babylon, and then probably Atlantis, and who knows if it goes back further than that, or you know, like I don't know. We don't know. We're trying to figure it out, right? New Age hasn't just destroyed spirituality, but psychology too, yes. Has spread so much misinformation on mental disorders. Yeah, absolutely, Dragon Blingy. It kills me, honestly, how bad it is sometimes. But that's why I try so hard to find like historical relevance and like factual relevance that back up like the spiritual stuff that I love. Because you know what, the truth of the matter is that like the reason why dragons are in cultures all around the world could be because like these like ancient nomads that were survivors of an ancient civilization who worked with dragons, who might have really been real in the water, like maybe fucking maybe that is the remnants of that knowledge being planted throughout humanity so we wouldn't forget dragons. I'm gonna cry. I'm gonna cry. I just love dragons! What is my life? Why did my love for dragons bring me this far, brother? I ask myself all the time. Names have been changed so much that we don't know the original names of places colonized. Yes, Phoenix Holly, I know. It talks a little bit about this in this book, I believe. All right, let's get back to where we were at. It says, when a modicum of security has finally been achieved and the people were at last free to explore their own past, little was left for them to base their history upon save the dim memories handed down from generation to generation by word of mouth of the names and deeds of long dead heroes and heroines. These former leaders became the deities and demi-deities, heroes and heras of the new world. Oh, hello. Yeah.
Can you just say happy birthday to Robert Renee?
Happy birthday, Robert Renee.
Happy birthday to you.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Robert. Happy birthday to you.
Have fun.
Okay, thank you. Oh my gosh. Please go check out my friend Robert Renee. He's had me in some of his music videos on YouTube, and he's just like the sweetest. Like, he's absolutely the sweetest, so he's amazing. But back into the zone. Okay, back into the zone. It says, I'll just start over. It says, when a modicum of security had finally been achieved and the people were at last free to explore their own past, little was left for them to base their history upon save the dim memories handed down from generation to generation by word of mouth of the names and deeds of long dead heroes and heroines. These former leaders became the deities and demi-deities, heroes and heras of the new world, and their deeds embodied the mythical record of their descendants. For as Peter Book said, the mythology of today is but the history of yesterday, unquote. And, quote, the myths are the memory of real events experienced by the human race, unquote, as Bachofen so presently observed hundreds of years ago. What, after all, do we know of the ancient world so far to permit us to adopt an attitude of negation to the deep-rooted tradition so oft repeated in the most vulnerable chronicles, that at a period almost transcending the imagination, a civilization of a high order, from which all the cultures of this planet proceeded, shone, flickered, and like a shattered sun, cast its broken light upon the dark places of our star? This is why I feel like my dragon guardians tell me I'm supposed to look everywhere in all religions, and I'm supposed to read the Quran, and I'm supposed to read the Bible, and I'm supposed to read the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and I'm supposed to read the Hadiths, and I'm supposed to read the teachings in, you know, of like Hinduism, and I'm supposed to read like Buddha's teachings, and I'm supposed to learn about Santeria and voodoo and all of these other things that I have yet to discover, and native indigenous practices all over the world, because all of it has a trace back to the original source, which is what I would kind of say is like, what, God, right? The closest I could like essentially tangibly understand is God, I feel. I want a copy of the Book of the Dead, but I don't know which translation I should get. Yeah, I'm gonna look into that, Nightmare Fuel Studios, and when I find the right translation of the Book of the Dead, we'll also do a read along of that one too, you know? So, because I think it's just important, you know what I mean? 200 years ago, the great French academician, astronomer, philosopher, and man of letters, Sylvain Bailly, wrote in his History of Ancient and Modern Astronomy, quote, "The only rational supposition remains that there must have been a great original nation, now utterly extinct, and of whose history no document remains, who had advanced to a very high degree of perfection in the sciences and the arts, who sent colonies to the other parts of the world, who, in fine, were the instructors and communicated their knowledge to peoples more barbarous than they," unquote. And I think that also might be a pipeline into alt-right racist things to believe. So that's why I think this book is really awesome for my decolonization journey, because this book literally feels like my textbook for the practice that I have with pickle chips, essentially, and just some of the other like higher ranking arcane type of magical dragons that I work with, because of the type of things they tell me to study. And a lot of them have been telling me to do the utmost advanced studies in history, and it burns the hell out of my brain. But I try the best I can. So now we're into part 1. How do you say this? It says Gynocratic world. Part 1, the Gynocratic world. So we haven't even gotten into the meat and potatoes of the book. Can I just bring you in for a second? Do you know how insane that is? We haven't even started the actual like parts of this book. We've only gone through the preface and the prelogue. We're just now getting into part 1. Okay. Now that you guys have the context for the book that we're about to read, I'm about to blow you guys away. Oh, jeez. Yeah, I know. I can't even believe that this is a real book on the planet Earth. It says, "I can't make out why a belief in Father God's authorship of the universe and its laws should be considered any more scientific than a belief in the inspiration of this artificial system by a mother goddess." Robert Graves. Okay. And look how awesome this is. We get a map. That's why I'm claiming this as my Bible. This book is my Bible. I do not give a shit. Okay. It's basically, it says Anatolia in the east. So there's a lot of these words that I'm unfamiliar with, how racist or not they are. So a lot of them starts with A's, and some of them are like fine, and some of them are like bad. So I know Aryan, I think, is one that we should just like as a red flag term. But I'm also gonna go back in with this book. You know, I'm reading it live with you guys to try and process the information and like live study it with you guys. Pickle Chips wanted me to show you how I live study material, and then I'll end up going back with Pickle Chips and like rereading this and highlighting different parts of the book and just like really breaking it down, because I just feel like there's so many things in here that I need to cover. So part 1, chapter 1, women and the second sex. Without a knowledge of the origins, the science of history can come to no conclusion. J.J. Bekoffen. The origins. When above the heavens had not been formed, when the earth beneath had no name, Tiamat brought forth them both. Tiamat, the mother of the gods, creator of all. So runs the earliest record account of the creation of the universe and of man. Part 1 starts with a dragon, you guys. I'm gonna cry. I can't believe I found this book. Okay. In all myth throughout the world, from the sun's rising beyond the farthest shores of Asia to its setting west of the farthest islands of the vast Pacific, the first creator of all is a goddess. Her names are as many as the varied as the peoples whom she created and who worshipped her as the first principle. In later myth, she is replaced by a god, sometimes deliberately, as in the case of Anat and Jehovah. Sometimes by an arbitrary change in sex, but not in name, as in the cases of Ea in Syria, Siva in India, and Atia in Polynesia. And sometimes by a gradual metamorphosis from female to male, as in the case of Metisthenes. In earliest Greek mythology, the creative principle is Metis, female intelligence. She is the creator of all, who, like Phoenician Carthaginian Tanit, like Tiamat, like Gaia, like Anat, creates the world without a male partner. Originally, she was all female. By the time of Orpheus, however, she had become bisexual. A hermaphrodite, Metisthenes, creator and begetter in one body. Her final transformation by classical times into all male Phanes illustrates the ancient concept of the evolution of the human race. For the original femaleness of all human beings is reflected in the belief among the ancients and voiced by Plato and the Symposium that the human race was once unisexed, male and female combined in one self-perpetuating female body. In the Orphic religion, contrary to St. Paul's error, quote, man was of woman, not woman of man, unquote. Thus, the modern concept that woman was made for man is of very recent origin. Yet, from St. Paul to Rousseau, who says, Emily, that the body of woman is made expressly to please man, unquote, the canard has been widely repeated. Parentheses, the 19th century, a prominent Anglican divine told his congregation that the lines of the cantaloupe were made expressly for man's convenience in slicing it. Parentheses. That's like an example of how like world was essentially made. It was like proof that world was made for man. But on what the assumption that woman's body was made for man's convenience based? Who is to say that the reverse is not the truth and that the man's body was not made expressly to please women? On the biological evidence, the latter assumption seems more logical than the contrary assumption and its endorsement by those arch-antifeminists, Paul and Rousseau. Women's reproductive organs are far older than man's and far more highly evolved. Even the lowest mammals, as well as in woman, the ovaries, uterus, vagina, etc., are similar, indicating that the female reproductive system was one of the first things perfected by nature. On the other hand, the male reproductive organs, the testicles and the penis, vary as much among the species through the course of evolution as does the shape of the foot from hoof to paw. Apparently then, the male penis evolved to suit the vagina, not the vagina to suit the penis. Proof that the penis is much later development than that of the female vulva is found in the evidence that the male himself was a late mutation from the original female creature. All right, we're going to get into some really hardcore language, okay? I'm just reading a book, okay? I'm just reading a book. Please don't flag me. I'm just reading a book. I'm just reading a book. All right, can you guys handle it? Are you ready? Okay. Okay. It says, for man is but an imperfect female. Genetics and psychologists tell us that the Y chromosome that produces males is a deformed and broken X chromosome, the female chromosome. All women have 2 X chromosomes, while the male has 1 X derived from his mother and 1 Y from his father. It seems very logical that the small and twisted Y chromosome is a genetic error, an accident of nature, and that originally there was only 1 sex, the female. What do you guys think? What do you guys think? I don't know, man. I told YouTube this video was not made for kids, so they better take me seriously when I meant that shit. Okay? I am reading a book and asking you what you think because I have no idea. I've never seen anything like this. What's the title? It's called The First Sex by Elizabeth Gould Davis. It says, asexual reproduction by females, parthenogenesis, is not only possible, but it still occurs here and there in the modern world, perhaps as an atavistic survival of the once only means of reproduction in an all-female world. Since the discovery of the proof of parthenogenesis by Jacques Loeb in 1911, quote, it has been known that the male is not necessary for reproduction, and that a simple physiochemical agent in the female is enough to bring it about, unquote. Susan Michelmore describes a bird, the female, of which possesses one ovary and one testes, either of which organ may become active under various circumstances. This phenomenon hints at the original constitution of the human male and female in one female body. When half of this being broke away, the two sexes appeared. The catastrophe that caused the male mutation and the breaking off or crippling of the X chromosome to form the deformed Y is perhaps symbolized in Plato's race memory of the separation of the sexes. What do you guys think? What do you guys think? I have no idea what I think. This is insane. I'm gonna have to do a lot of deep dives into a lot of different materials, especially the sources that are referenced in this book. This book is truly an ongoing study case for me. You know what I mean? This is actually true. There's been a case of a lesbian couple being able to get pregnant without sperm. Had lost the article though. Interesting. Ooh, it's getting spicy. Okay. I hope you know, if you're a man watching this right now, and I read this, I hope you know I'm not saying this to make you feel less than or inferior or anything. I'm just reading a book that's really old and I think we should think about what it has to say. So this next paragraph is one of the paragraphs that made the man who previously had the book really mad. Okay, so are you ready? It says, the first males were mutants, freaks, produced by some damage to the genes caused perhaps by disease or radiation bombardment from the sun. Maleness remains a recessive genetic trait like colorblindness and hemophilia, with which it is linked. The suspicion that maleness is abnormal and that the Y chromosome is an accidental mutation boding no good for the race is strongly supported by the recent discovery by geneticists that congenital killers and criminals are possessed of not one but two Y chromosomes bearing a double dose, as it were, of genetically undesirable maleness. If the Y chromosome is a degeneration and a deformity of the female X chromosome, then the male sex represents a degeneration and deformity of the female. I didn't say it. It is a little dated, okay? There's some good and some bad shit in here. Like I said, we found some racist, anti-Semitic stuff already in here. But I think we should keep going because it's a good read, my friends. Not only does the Y chromosome have a negative effect in the hereditary of males, but now it has been found in studies by Kurt Stern and Arthur Jensen that the extra Y chromosome in females accounts not only for the greater freedom of girls from birth defects and congenital diseases, a fact which has been long known, but also for the superior psychological makeup and the superior intelligence of women over men. Interesting. Women are the race itself, the strong primary sex, and man the biological afterthought. As a 19th century scientist and forerunner of Ashley Monteau wrote, in prehistoric times, quote, man was the despised sex, unquote, as Robert Graves wrote with typical Gravesian prescience in 1955. For subsequent archaeological research has revealed the extent of, quote, man's subservience to women, unquote, and the secondary role played by men in the period immediately preceding the present historical era. Quote, man was the weaker sex. Men could be trusted to hunt, fish, guard the herds, mind the flocks, and gather certain crops as long as they did not transgress matriarchal law, unquote, or interfere with government. Quote, women was the dominant sex, and man her frightened victim, unquote. And then we have, quote, the men occupy a position which could not but enhance the natural superiority of women. Women towers above man, and the physical beauty which distinguishes the women of matriarchal states reflects the prestige of her position, unquote, writes Beckhoffen. Quote, the very names of the men reflect the contempt inspired by their marauding ways. The ignominy implied in all their names marks the contrast between the dominant women and the servile man, unquote. Typical names given to early men, as cited by Beckhoffen, reflect the contempt in which the male sex was held. Sintian, meaning thief, Ozole, meaning bad smell, or Physolis, meaning dirty. What names? Sintin, Ozeliu, Physoles, thief, stinker, dirt, the Tom, Dick, and Harry of old. Quote, men were but the servers of women, unquote, wrote Charles Settlement of the pre-Machaean Greeks. And the same was true throughout the ancient world. The myth of Hercules and Omphale portrays the relationship between Bronze Age woman and man. Omphale, the great queen of Lydia, chooses Hercules, the muscular wild man, as her slave and sex object. He is enslaved by her, not to serve her, bodyguard, or warrior, but merely to serve as her lover. Between sexual bouts, she sends him on dangerous or degrading missions, the, quote, labors of Hercules, unquote, some of which typify the work demanded of men by ancient women. Degrading, dirty work, such as cleaning out the Aegean stables or picking up piece by piece the excrement of giant centimulin birds, or Stymphalian birds. All of her commands, these demeaning ones, as well as the merely whimsical ones, such as stealing the Amazon queen's girdle, Hercules obeys without demur. What a very interesting progressive, take. Yeah, very extreme is how I would describe her explanations on this. Absolutely. Time to show it's some aggressive love. Yeah, dude. I'm a mutant and proud Wonders X-Men costume on Amazon. I don't really know if I subscribe to the notion of men being mutants. I think that's kind of rude. I'm not gonna lie. I just found that this book is so fascinating. It's so fascinating. I found the article. It's a phenomenon called parthenogenesis. Yeah, I'm gonna have to deep dive into that one, Jupiter Haven. Thank you for letting us know. But anyway, it says with a typical male ratationation, as Graves say, men have interpreted this myth as a horrible example of the power a licentious and wicked woman can exert over even the noblest of men. But that is not its meaning at all. In fact, this myth, like most, contains a kernel of historical truth. No doubt there was a queen of Lydia named Omphale, and there was certainly many men in early times named Hercules or Hercales. The very name means son of a glorified ancestress Hera, the heroic concept having been originally feminine. And with equal lack of doubt, one of these was a slave owned by Queen Omphale whose exploits carried out her bidding were transformed by later patriarchal writers into the wonder steeds of Hercules. Hercales was bought for 3 silver talents by Omphale, queen of Lydia, a woman with a good eye for a bargain, and he served her faithfully, writes Graves, quoting Apollodorus. The strange initiatory rites and sex customs among previous peoples that so amazed the European explorers of the 16th to 19th centuries bear out the worldwide tradition of the original and natural inferiority of men. In all male initiatory rites of puberty, past and present, the rituals consist entirely in men pretending to be women, quote, as if men can become men only by ... taking over the functions that women perform naturally, unquote, as Margaret Mead writes. So I cannot read the rest of this little section because it's very, very grotesque and would violate the guidelines. But I will just say it's about genital, and it's about mutilating the man to be like the woman. and we don't really need to talk about that. So yeah, we're just gonna keep going down the rabbit hole in the next one. So it says, Women the Civilizer. It says, contrary to the pusillanimity of early man and the memory of the ancients was the exalted position, the divinity even, of women. Throughout the ancient world, the tradition prevailed that women held the secrets of nature and were the only channels through which flowed the wisdom and knowledge of the ages. This belief is reflected in the priority of female oracles, prophets, priests, Siblis, Pythonesses, Maenads, Erinyes, Shamanesses, and so on. It says, quote, women were the originators and repositories of all culture and the source of the first civilization, unquote. In fact, women dragged man kicking and screaming out of savagery into the new Stone Age, as anthropology and archaeology have learned, and as myth and tradition have always asserted. Quote, women organized the home crew to pound the thresh the grain, comb the wool, dry the skins, etc. They invented pottery and weaving, discovered how to keep foods by cold storage or by cooking. Women, in fact, invented industrialization, unquote, writes Buckminster Fuller. These nurturing chores, now looked down upon by men as quote-unquote women's work, were indeed women's work, the first important work of human society. Quote, men could be trusted to hunt and fish, unquote, as Graves says, so long as they did not interfere with the important work of the community. Men acquiesced in this discrimination, not from masculine pride, but because they believed that women were better able to perform these tasks which they, the women, had invented and inaugurated. The achievements that distinguished the New Stone Age from the Old are, quote, the making of pots, the weaving of textiles, the planting and harvesting of crops, and the domestication of animals, unquote. And, quote, and women did the weaving, and she invented pottery making. More than this, she must be credited with the planting and harvesting of grain, for while her lord and master enjoyed himself, she gathered fruits and nuts and edible seeds, and sooner or later observed that the seeds dropped on the midden pile produced newer and bigger plants, unquote. Thus she invented agriculture, and with its civilization, for, quote, out of agriculture rose a settled community and a surplus of provender, which allowed the few to think and plan and build civilization, unquote. So, this book is for real, Hidden Treasure. I don't know how I felt this book. This book is insane. I don't even know what to do with myself. I like this book, but it is so, I don't know, but I mean, okay, I do not know what to say, but yeah, it's okay. Let me tell you something. This book is like, I think people might be uncomfortable with this book because, like, it's very common to hear very misogynistic texts, but, like, we don't really see a lot of texts in the tone that are completely almost the opposite of that spectrum, right? Like, this is probably taking it a step to, like female supremacy and, like, saying that, like, women are, like, above men and, like, men should submit to women, and, like, literally everything that we have in our society today with men, like, just insert women, and everything in our society today with women, just insert men and, like, switch it around. And I don't think that's a good idea either. I just think that this is a very interesting book to, I don't know. I wasn't gonna leave my house today, but when I woke up, I asked, like, my spirit team for a sign that I was doing the right thing. I've been getting a lot of harassment in my personal life for just what I stand for. And I've worked way too long and hard this is why this book is so special to me, you guys. Which is why I've worked so long and hard to get to a place where I can speak my truth. Now that I'm speaking my truth, I'm getting a lot of backlash for it in my personal life, and it's overwhelming. And in a way that's never happened to me before, in a way that's been, like, I've had, like, to report, like, some stuff. But, like, the reality is today I wasn't gonna go anywhere, and I asked my spirit team just, hey, give me a sign today that I'm doing the right thing. And I ended up going outside of the house with my boyfriend to do a couple things, and we ended up doing so many more different things than we originally expected, and right before I was gonna ask him to take me home, he asked me to go somewhere else. And we went there, and then it was like a house furnishing place, you know? And we were just looking around, and we found just like a little setup that we liked. And when I go to different like house decor places, I look at the decorative books because that's just an obsession of mine that I've always had since I was a little kid. I like looking at the books people decorate their houses with and then asking them about it, because 9 times out of 10 when I asked them, oh, do you know what books you have like sitting in your house, like, oh, do you read it, 9 times out of 10 these people didn't even know what the title of the book was, or like these decorative books were like not important to them. And sometimes I would ask them, oh, could I have that book, if like the decorative book had like a really cool like title or whatever. And I've come into a lot of like history this way. Like I have books that show that Palestine existed before Israel ever was even on the map, like that kind of history, through asking about like decorative fucking books. Like there's so many hidden gems. And yeah, I found this book today in this house decor place, and this book wasn't for sale because it was part of the store decor. So it was kind of like a buy other things, donate to get it kind of thing, you know. It was really magical, like a vintage type of situation, but I'm very grateful. Yeah, it's worth it. It was worth it. It was worth it. It was meant to be. Yeah. What are the odds that you just randomly happened to find this book? It was meant to be. Yeah, meant to be indeed. I literally couldn't even believe it. And the book talks about so many different facets of who I am as a person. It talks about the history of the Abrahamic religions, which my guardians tell me I'm supposed to study. It's talking to me about the history of dragons. It's talking to me the history about fairies. It's talking to me the history about Celtic mythology and Druidry. It's talking to me the history about a lot of things. I'm overwhelmed. But it does have a very misandrous tone. But I kind of appreciate that, because I wouldn't want to read a book like this about what it's about if it wasn't by a woman who was pissed off. Because like if you're really studying the type of history of like the suppression of like witchcraft and magic, like honestly you guys, you'll find that if you're not angry, you're not paying attention. That's all I'll say. So it says, she was the only true begetter of the new Stone Age, writes McGowan, for she invented milling stones to grind seeds, while her man was still a Paleolithic, a savage of the old Stone Age. Perhaps she watched the wearing away of mortar and pestle and milling stone as she ground her seeds into flour between them, and the idea occurred to her that it was possible to grind stones into axes and other implements, and thus she invented manufacture. So let us revise the old stereotype planted in our minds by the textbooks of shaggy caveman discovering that salting the fish and cooking the food would preserve them from spoiling, that clay shaped into pots and baked on the hearth would hold liquids, that reeds woven together would make baskets, shelter, clothing, containers, that stones chipped and rubbed into shape would make tools and implements. Let us correct the old impression that it was shaggy man who first saw the usefulness of fire and thought of ways to preserve and utilize and create it. That shaggy man was first found, that a log placed under his burden would roll it, and invented the wheel. That shaggy man discovered that a floating log would bear his weight and carry him across the river, and invented boats. Above all, let us dismiss the incongruous picture of shaggy caveman decorating his pottery and basketry with dainty designs and painting his cave home walls with exquisite delineations of nature. For it was not man, but woman who made all these discoveries and invented all these crafts. Women eternally struggling to make the best of things, to provide food and shelter for her children, to make quote-unquote home comfortable for them, to soften and brighten their lives, and to make the world a safer and more pleasant place for them to grow in. While man perused his hobbies of hunting and fishing and holding his lodge meetings, women initiated and carried on the real work of the world. Quote unquote, women invented work, for primitive man was only an idler, McGowan writes. Quote, "It was women, the gatherer, not the man, the hunter, who fed the primitive family," unquote, writes Irvine DeVore of Harvard. Quote, "As still happens, man's activity got the publicity and made the biggest outward impression, but it was women's quiet work which kept things going. Women was the real provider for the household," unquote. Even Jesuit scholar Joseph Goethes affirms the ancient supremacy of woman. Quote, "Everything points to the growing of plants for food having originated with the women. It is here that individual property ownership originated. It was the woman who owns the fields and dwellings. Marriages are matrilocal, and the man lives with his wife in her village or else remains with his mother. Economy and law revolve around the women. The universe thus centered her on the vitagal aspect of nature, with which through technical domination she has become associated," unquote. And she has with the meteorological and astronomical phenomena with which affect plant growth and the well-being of society. When women in her industry and inventiveness says Briffault, had finally enabled man to live in security in a woman-dominated civilization, he established the custom of taking over her ideas and commercializing them. The land itself, however, continued to belong to the women, and in Europe, even comparatively late historical times, quote, "The man must come as a suitor to the woman, through whom alone he could enter into possession of the land," unquote. The oldest words in language of all the Indo-European peoples, words dating back to the Gynocratic age before the separation of the nations, are the words that apply to women's work, the words for spinning and sewing, for grinding and milling grain, for grain itself and agricultural, field and plow, for the taming and breaking in of animals, for the use of fire in cooking and of salt in preserving foods, for the art of counting in numbers, for axle, cart, wagon, ship, and oar, for the building of walls and houses and boats, and for the wearing of clothes and adornment. Furthermore, myth and tradition credit women with all in the inventions and discoveries these words connote, and mythology, we repeat, is the memory of real events experienced by the human race. Quote, "Who will continue to ask why all the qualities that embellish man's life are known by feminine names," unquote. Why justice, peace, intelligence, wisdom, rectitude, devotion, liberty, mercy, intellect, nobility, concord, gentleness, clemency, generosity, kindliness, dignity, spirit, soul, freedom, all are feminine. These choices is no free invention or accident, but is an expression of historical truth. The accord between historical facts and the linguistic phenomenon is evident." How do you guys feel about this so far? You know? Oh, I love the kitten as the marriage gift for women. It's my favorite thing I've ever heard of. Honestly. Let's also not forget that there were female Vikings as well. They were just as skilled warriors. Hell yeah. They were some of my favorite. Well, shaggy cavemen. I love how offensive some of the languages in this book. It's so funny to me. I like that mythology comes from memories. Yeah, it's an interesting concept, isn't it, Phoenix Holly? I think it's really interesting, like an ancient collective memory, if you will, of just humanity. I digress. The Logos. Both in agriculture, which was invented by women, and in the erection of walls, which the ancients identified with the matriarchal era, women achieved a perfection which astonished later generations. From the banks of the Nile to the shores of the Black Sea, from Central Asia to Italy, women's names and deeds are interwoven with the history and the founding of cities which became famous. The worldwide tradition that women first built towns and walls reflects not only the fact that women were the first civilizers, but that the mysterious megaliths, whose engineering secret was already lost in early patriarchal historical times, were the work of the matriarchal period. The Greek legend of Amphion, the notes of whose lyre caused large stones to rise into walls, bears out the universal belief among primitive peoples that these huge stone structures, from Gizeh to Avonbury, from India to Yucatan and Peru, were built by means of some power long lost to mankind. The Spaniards in the 16th century were told by the Incas that the ancient megalithic ruins of Peru and Colombia were built by a remote people who merely struck a note of music and the mammoth stones rose and slid into place. And Herodotus reports that among the Lydians and the traditions was preserved in his time that the megalithic monuments of Lydia had been built by the women of old. Even the remarkable engineering works of historical Babylon, numbered among the 7 wonders of the world, were credited by the ancients to the genius of 2 queens, Semiramis and Nictocracies. The Old Testament ascribes the invention of civilized arts to Tubal-Cain. But who is Tubal-Cain? Cain himself, as we shall see in a later chapter, is but a symbol of the old matriarchal city statues that were overthrown by the pastoral nomads, the Abels. Tubal-Cain postdates him, yet he is oddly credited with inventing civilized arts that had predated Cain. The mystery's solution lies in the name itself, Tubal. Are you ready? We're about to fucking close it in, all right? Close this shit in, right? The Interpreter's Dictionary of the Bible under Tubal says that Tubal in Hebrew, Tubal, means one who brings forth a female, thus giving the name Tubal-Cain a doubly feminine connotation. The Mythology of All Races tells us that The Mythology of All Races tells us that the original of Tubal was Tibir. And in the same volume, we find that Tibir, or Tibira, was another name for the Sumerian Greek goddess Tiamat. Fucking dragon, fucking dragon, fucking dragons, fucking dragons, I said fucking dragons, fucking dragons, okay. I wouldn't doubt that Incas knew some shit about vocal vibrations, okay? Do I think aliens taught them that shit? No. I think their divine women oracles sat in deep meditation and worked with their guides the way that I work with my dragon guardians, and they figured that shit out themselves. The Sumerian epic of Taktug Tibir and Dilmun speaks of an early time when Tibir had not yet laid a foundation, a reference that corroborates the belief that women laid the first foundation, that is, of walls and cities, and were thus the first fashioners of civilized society, the Tubal-Cains of actuality. Just as the story of Noah and the Ark is borrowed from the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh and the creation story from the Babylonian epic of Enuma Elish, so the entire Cain Tubal Cain cycle in Genesis is borrowed from the epic of Tagtug and Dilmun. And Tagtug or Tibir is Tubal Cain. Here we have a link, if a somewhat tenuous one, of Sumer and the lost civilization with the Celts. For Herodotus writes that the great goddess of the Celts in his time was known as Tabiti, which could have been a Celtic corruption of the older name Tiberia, as Tubal was a Hebrew corruption of Tibir. Athene, a later aspect of the great goddess, or Athene, I think, was credited by the Greeks with having invented the flute, the trumpet, the earthenware pot, the plow, the rake, the oxen yoke, the horse bridle, the chariot, the wheel, the ship, the art of numbers, fire, cooking, weaving, and spinning. In other words, women invented or discovered or first practiced music, ceramics, agriculture, animal domestication, land transportation, water transportation, commerce, mathematics, handicrafts, domestic economy, and industry. What else, if any use, has been invented in the centuries since in the end of the matriarchal era? The internet, which was also invented by a woman. Woman the divine. Woman by her very nature was considered to participate in that of the divinity. Men looked upon her as divine. Women were held sacred. Women, by means of their intuition, gave the first mighty impulse to the civilization of the human race. But what is this intuition that women are supposed to have in place of brains? Let the incomparable H.L. McKinnon answer the question. We're about to get one of the best explanations of intuition you've ever heard in your fucking life. Are you ready? Oh, yeah, ready. Okay. All this intuition is no more and no less than intelligence. Intelligence so keen that it can penetrate to the hidden truth through the most formidable wrappings of false semblance and demeanor. Women decide the larger questions of life correctly and quickly, not because of intuition, but simply and solely because they have sense. They see at a glance what most men could not see with searchlights and telescopes. They are at grips with the essentials of a problem before men have finished debating its mere externals. It is a rare, rare man who is as steadily intelligent, as constantly sound in judgment, as little put off by appearance as the average woman. Just letting that one marinate. It's pretty good. Okay. This superiority of intellect exerted a strong influence on primitive man. Men could not help but believe that woman was closer to the deity than was man, that she had a superior understanding of the laws of nature, laws that baffled his dimmer perceptions and rendered him dependent on woman as the interpreter between man, and as the interpreter between man and deity. Woman manifests justice unconsciously, but with full certainty. She is naturally in herself just wise. That is why the battle lines parted at her bidding, why she was the arbiter who could compose quarrels among tribes and among nations. Women dominated man. She was a fascinating magician before whom his soul trembled. From her sprang poetry, music, and all the arts. When the cave paintings in Altamira in Spain were first discovered less than 100 years ago, the world was astounded at their beauty and artistic perfection. Certainly no chinless, this is really funny, certainly no chinless, protagonist, skin-clad savage could have conceived or executed them. They were attributed to Cro-Magnon man, the ancestor of modern Europeans, and were described by earlier archaeologists androcentric antiquarians as magic symbols drawn by men to induce the animals depicted to yield quietly to their human hunters. But there were many holes in this hypothesis. Their location in low-ceilinged sleeping quarters, which were difficult of access and rarely used by man. Their feminine delicacy of line, their feeling of compassion for the hunted beasts, the caricaturish depictions of the hunters certainly not flattering to the male of the human species, and the presence of imprints of women's and children's hands on the walls around the paintings. The paintings must have been art for art's sake, and not magic symbols as originally assumed. They were painted on the walls of rock shelters used as living quarters, brighten it up like new slipcovers and draperies. And what man ever bothered to brighten up rooms in which he spent little or no time? What a fucking burn. What a fucking burn. This book is a little sassy, okay, a little. Cave art is genuinely a woman's art, writes the artist Violetta Micheli, and far from being a merely utilitarian medium. It is animated by a single motive, namely the appreciation of the beauty of form, as Henry Fairfield Osborne observes. The wild animals painted on the cave walls are idealistically beautiful. Their grace of movement and delicacy of line go far beyond the requirements of any utilitarian depiction for magic purposes. The wounded animals are shown with expressions of human grief and shock on their faces, and the dying ones are of the embodiment of despair. In contrast to the animal, the human male hunters are shown as mere sticks, figures such as a child might draw of the human form, and perhaps the children did draw them. They wear animal masks and are far more ferocious and bestial than are the faces of the hunted animals. These unflattering depictions of men remind one of the shambling, cretinous-looking warriors shown on the famous warrior vase found in Mycenae. Could this too have been the work of women artists? The most convincing evidence of all these cave paintings are the work of the women who are the work of women are the prints of women's and children's hands upon the walls around the paintings. It was as if some prehistoric woman alone on a rainy day with her children has set to amuse them by showing them where the men were hunting the wild animals. She had made her paint and drawn her compassionate likeness of the poor hunted animals, and had then allowed the children to draw in the image of what served as quote-unquote daddy in those matriarchal days when, quote, men served women only as the hunters and warriors, unquote, as Settleman says. Having still a little paint left and the rain still preventing the children from going out to play, this Cro-Magnon mother absently dipped her hand in the paint and pressed it against the wall. The children imitated her action, and 20,000 years later, Signor Don Marcelino de Satola, oh my goodness, exploring the cave at Altamira with his little daughter, discovered them, the handprints, the animals and little sticks of men, and the world wondered. Myth, legend, and tradition all attribute the invention of decorative arts to women, and archaeology and anthropology bear out the tradition. Similarly, music, song, poetry, and dance are traced to the women of primordial ages by mythology. And that's the end of part 1, chapter 1. And the next one you guys aren't ready for. Mythology speaks. When I got to this chapter in the book, I knew I had to go live and read this book because this one here is crazy. I've never bothered to decorate my bedroom, and I spend a lot of time there. Yeah, Pixel Night. I want you to know that this book is very stereotypical in the way it describes like men and women. And I am in no way endorsing every single thing in this book. I just am reading it to you guys because I think it's a really refreshing take on history, especially a book from the 1970s that is considered vintage today. I haven't found a book this sassy, this, I guess, feminist about the history of humanity, religion, mythology, God being a woman, all of these things. It's just a very rare find. I don't know how I ended up getting it, but we're here. But I am going to take a quick little second to tap into the bathroom and then tap back into the live. So I'm going to be back in 2 seconds. I will see you very soon, but we'll be back. Poof, I teleported, okay. No, I did not abandon you guys. Don't talk to me like that. Don't you dare tell me things that are not true. Okay, we are back. Let's see, we are at chapter 2, so I knew I would have an easy remembrance of where I'm at. We get to learn about some more different gods and goddesses in here, so you're going to be excited about this one, okay? It says, Mythology Speaks, chapter 2. Part 1, chapter 2, Mythology Speaks. But where are those origins to be found? The answer is not in doubt. In myth, the faithful picture of the oldest era. J.J. Bekoffen. Renewal and diffusion. European explorers of the Great Age of Discovery, the 15th through the 18th century AD, were struck by the similarities they found among primitive tribes who were so cut off from the world that they were unaware even of the people on the next island. The Europeans were amazed to find that certain beliefs and legends, myths and traditions, customs and taboos were worldwide and varied only in non-essentials from Siberia to South Seas. It was the discovery of these unaccountable similarities that led anthropologists of the 19th century, primarily the Germans George Waits and Adolf Basten, to formulate the autochthonous theory of local evolution. That is, the theory that all people progress through certain stages of development without benefit of contact or example. I'm pretty sure that might be a Nazi pipeline too. By the 20th century, this theory had lapsed into the oblivion from which it should never have emerged. As A.C. Haddon says, I think that's confirmation, and its place had been taken by the diffusionist theory. This theory, now accepted by the more perceptive scholars, claims that, quote, development took place in one center only and thence spread out over the face of Earth, unquote. There is this original center that might have been undecided. Recent archaeological research seems to point to a source in Anatolia, but Anatolia may have been only a last outpost of the original civilization. The big question is whether diffusion was affected by migration of peoples from a central origin, or whether civilization was consciously planted around the world in a lost age when world travel was a commonplace. Will we know? We may never know. If migration from a central origin were the answer, it would seem that there would not have been the retrogression that has obviously taken place among the world's peoples. Conscious planting by a superior race would account for the fact that with this demise of the central civilization, the whole world would not only cease to advance, but actually recede into savagery. So we are getting into some racist territory here. Whenever it's talking about, like, I guess a superior race, problematic, okay? Problematic, okay? Can we just understand that any history about a superior race is problematic? Okay, during the 50s, 60s, and 70s, there were lots of Nazi pipelines and occultism due to former escaped Nazis who were part of occult secret societies, spreading their lies and propaganda through spirituality. Yes, that's why I think that this book is the most important book for me to ever read in my lifetime, because this is a very racist book. This is a very, I guess it's claiming to be a very historically accurate book. It's also a very feminist book, I would say. And it's a book that I think has a lot of really interesting nuggets of truth to dive into, and I also think it has a lot of really scary racist Nazi traps, if that makes sense. So there's a lot to really unpack with this, but we're about to get into the fairy stuff, so here we go. The further back we go into the investigation of peoples as of language and the more sophisticated we find them to have been. In Ireland, the very first settlers in Firbuckles, the little people of Irish myth, retained an ancient knowledge that their conquerors, the brilliant and gifted Tuatha De Danann, found not wholly comprehensible. And the Mycelians who conquered the Tuatha, like all the later Celts, had lost the complex astronomical system and regained the old ideas about the immortality of the soul only in the vaguest of ways. The common religion of the archaic civilization, writes John Rays, from the Baltic to Gibraltar was Druidism, and Druidism is the religion of the Celts. Druidism can be traced back to the most remote antiquity, continues Rays, beyond Celtic Europe and into the Aegean era. That might be a racist word, maybe. Let me know if it is. The Druids were once all women, Druidesses, and even in Roman times, as Caesar comments, the Lady Druids were consulted by the Celtic chiefs of Gaul. In the 1st century of present era, according to Tacitus, the object of Druid worship was a great goddess whose shrine was in a grove of oaks upon an island in the sea. We got fairies in the book. We got dragons in the book. We got witches in the book. We got God in the book. We got cool shit in the book. We got crazy shit in the book. For the longest time, Norse pagans were straight up Nazis. Absolutely. It wasn't until the 80s when people started looking into the actual lore and history that distanced itself from Nazi propaganda. Thank God. Needed to happen sooner. Anyways, Sumer and the Celtic cross. The science of the Druids of historical times, their knowledge of astronomy and physics, and their ideas of the immortality of the soul were far too elaborate to have been invented by barbarians. Where then did they acquire this ancient wisdom? A wisdom evidenced by the mariners and later, much later, by the Thracian Orpheus. Dare we hypothesize that the center of a great lost civilization, wherever it may have been located, was destroyed by the general world cataclysm of the 10th millennium, where the North Pole shifted to the Sudan basin, and that the scant remnant of its leaders found refuge in the mountains fastness of Aegean Thrace? For in Thrace, the ancient knowledge of science was handed down to Orpheus' time. In Thrace, the classical Greeks found evidence of ancient technology far beyond their own capacities. Thrace, according to Apuleius, was the original home of witchcraft, parentheses, women wisdom, close parentheses, what the fuck? And the vicinity of Thrace dwelt the nations of Amazons, that blue-eyed race of women who lived entirely without men, murdering any man who dared approach their boundaries. Parentheses, Celtic mythologies includes a land of women similar to a nation of Amazons of Aegean legend. Quote, the tradition of the land of women, writes John A. McCluch, still exists in Irish folklore, unquote. I'm gonna need us to wholly back up. That was a lot. This book is essentially saying it's basically saying that the original home of witchcraft is women wisdom. Essentially, witchcraft is women wisdom. When a mom just knows, it's witchcraft. When my gut tells me that we shouldn't go there, it's witchcraft. In this definition. Would you guys like that definition of witchcraft? I kind of vibe that definition of witchcraft. I can subscribe to it. The Church of Satan has direct ties to the Waffen SS Anton LaVey, was very cozy with former SS members, and there's videos of LaVey saying straight up Nazi stuff, and the COS used SS occult symbols. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. We got to be so close to, so careful, I should say, to just be aware of how scary these pipelines are when you're not actively aware of them and aware of looking out for that when you're learning about these kinds of things, which is why I say the dragons require decolonization, because you can't properly study history without a decolonized lens. You won't be able to interpret the text properly. I mean, that doesn't sound quite right to me, though. I'm a dude and I have a pretty strong intuition as well. No, it says in here earlier, if you've come in later, that it's like very rare for like men to have really good intuition, but again, this is kind of like a very like female supremacy tone for the text. That's like the context that the book was written in, so that's kind of like, we're taking this like a scholarly approach, right? So it's important to know the tone that your text is written in. The tone of this text is very misandrist, it's very feminist in a very extreme way, and it's also very like female supremacy. It's also kind of dated, so it's a vintage text, right? It's from 1971. And it is written by a white woman, so it has some racism in here too. So there's just a lot going on in this book here, you know? So we're just trying to unpack it together because there's a lot going on here. I can see that as well, but when witchcraft is mentioned in history, it has to do with being in tune with nature for survival. Yes, Phoenix, that is how I feel as well. All right, here we go. It says, Perhaps it was only the wise women who escaped the great catastrophe, and in order to maintain the race, reproduction by parthenogenesis became commonplace. This would account for the myth of the ancients preserved by Plato that all their ancestors were female, and for the method of reproduction practiced by the Amazons. For according to the legend, although they were manless, the Amazons reared their girl babies and destroyed their boys born among them. Thrace, we may add, was also the site and the birth of the murder of Orpheus, the quote the mystery man of antiquity, unquote. Above all, in Thrace, the Druids had their origin. Druidism may well have been the ancient and original religion, and it would be interesting to trace this primary religion from its origin through Sumer into historical Celtic Europe and on into modern times. In Sumerian myth, the creator goddess Tiamat appeared out of the waves of the Etherian Sea, the Persian Gulf of today, as a quote-unquote fishwoman, and taught men the arts of life, quote, to construct cities, to found temples, to compile laws, and in short, instructed them in all things that tend to soften manners and humanize their lives, unquote. All things that tend to soften, as Boros of Babylon reported in the 4th century BC. Quote, from that time so universal were her instructions that nothing material had been added, unquote, says This event was believed to have taken place about 16,000 BC, but a later date seems more reasonable. Tiamat may have been a matriarchal queen of the Thracian Anatolian remnant of the lost civilization, who sometime in the 9th or 10th millennium journeyed to her colony on the Persian Gulf and reinstructed her people in the lost arts of civilization. The Euphrates River ran then, as it does today, from central Anatolia down to its outlet on the Persian Gulf, and geological evidence is that it was far wider and deeper even in biblical times than it is now. Tiamat may have sailed down this broad river from Anatolia or nearby Thrace in a ship whose figurehead was the mermaid-like creature of the ancient legend, half fish, half human. In later Babylonian myth, the mermaid had become the merman, Ones, but mermen are an anomaly in mythical zoology, and Oannes is obviously a late patriarchal attempt to masculinize the bringer of civilization. I don't know, you guys, this book is telling us that our girl Tiamat was the founder of civilization. This book is telling us that God is Tiamat. That's crazy to my brain. You know, that's crazy to my brain. We have a couple more pages we're going to read, and then we're going to be done for tonight, but it's crazy, you know, because in order to know, I can help you with research since I know a lot about the topic. That's awesome, honestly. There's literally Nazi pagan groups wearing a mask of being spiritual to recruit people to their ideology, and they're still very active to this day. Yes. Yeah, Nightmare Fuel Studios. That is something that I am so hardcore actively advocating against in my lifetime because that shit is scary as hell. So it would be good to, like, you know, have some help navigating that because I'm on my own over here. It says, it is pertinent to our hypothesis of the close connection vertically of the matriarchal Celts and the lost civilization that mermaids in later mythology were almost exclusively Celtic. Emphasis on the almost, because there's a lot of, like, I think there's Haitian mermaid myths too, so please don't forget that. Let's see, it says, the prevalence of tales of mermaids among Celtic populations, writes Sabine Baring-Gould, indicates these nymphs as having been originally deities of these people. It also indicates that the Celts, who in historical times had no navy, must at one time have had a close connection with the sea, the habitat of mermaids. Morgan Le Fay of Arthurian romance, Morgan of Irish folklore, and Morgana of the Danish and Italian Celtic remnant are all one and the same fairy queen, whose name means child of the sea, Mor being the Celtic word for sea. How did I find this book? How did I find this book? How did I find this book? This book is insane. The version of history this book is talking about is fairly different from what I learned in school. Yeah, same, Pixel Knight. You and me both, Pixel Knight. This is something else, my friend. It says, the connection of the cross with the Celtic mermaid or water goddess as displayed on ancient pre-Christian Celtic coins offers a fascinating field for study. These coins have been found at Marielles, Lorette, Quimper, and other parts of Gaelic France, as well as in Spain and Brittany, and they indicate that the cross was the symbol or the insignium of the ancient Celtic goddess, who may have been one with Tiamat herself. Do you know what that means? Do you know what that just said? This book just insinuated this thing called dragon fairies. My whole name is Dragon Feather. Spelled with an F-A-E. Okay, the dragons gave you this book. You didn't find it. You're 100 fucking 10% right, Nightmare Fuel Studios. If I ever worry dragons don't exist, I'll just look at this book, to be honest. I'll just look at this book. Significantly, the cross was a Druid emblem also, and the Druid cross, like those on the Celtic coins, had rounded arms of equal length, the shape of a shamrock or a four-leaf clover. It is for this reason, and not for any Christian analogy, that the shamrock is revered in Celtic Ireland, and the four-leaf clover is considered lucky throughout the modern Celtic world. It is intriguing to find that the same equiremed cross was an emblem of Poseidon, the Greek god of the sea, the water god, who according to Plato had been a deity of the Atlanteans, whose chief city was named for him. In Cretan Greek mythology, Poseidon was the son consort of the great goddess of Mycenae and Crete, the goddess Potnia. In the natural evolution of myth, goddesses almost inevitably turn into gods, especially when they are very important creator goddesses. W.R. Smith writes that he was astonished to find that the goddess of the ancient Semites, quote, changed their sex and became gods, unquote, actually in historical times. And Buck points out that as recently as 500 years ago, Atia, the great god of Polynesia, was a goddess. And so it may have been with Poseidon. He may originally have been a goddess, the goddess, in fact, Tiamat Potenia, the creator great goddess of Sumer, Crete, Atlantis, and of the Celts. His emblem, the cross, would therefore have been originally the emblem of the great goddess, as it seems to have continued to be the Celtic religion. Sophia. Welcome back to your daily dose of Dragon Feather. I was gifted this book by my Dragon Guardians. I mentioned a little bit earlier in the live how I came across this book, but it was a series of perfectly timed events, and it was so magical how it happened. I don't feel like explaining the story of how I got this book all over again, but if you're interested, please rewatch the video. You've missed a lot, but I found a book that basically dissects the history of human as God being a witch, basically, and not just any witch, but a dragon fairy queen witch woman. Holy crap. I'm reading a little bit more here because it's just insane. We're talking about how Tiamat and Poseidon were potentially a hybrid goddess at one point. It's insane. So here we go, my friends. It says the equiremed cross has been found on funerary urns of the Gynocratic Etruscans, and most significantly on the ancient Phoenician coin bearing its obverse image and sacred bull symbol of Gynocracy. At the site of ancient Byblos, a coin has been found that depicts the goddess Astarte, Istar Tiamat, holding an identical cross and resting her foot on the prow of a ship. Holy crap. The Celtic cross, as distinguished from the crosses of other kinds, of which there are very many, traveled far and wide in prehistoric times, for it has turned up in far-off Oceania, marked on the sacred stones of New Guinea, of the Easter Island. In Australia, it was found a pendant amulet of greenstone, carved in the shape of the Celtic cross, an exact duplicate of an amulet found in Egypt at Tel el Amarna, the site of the ancient city where Nefertiti and the pharaoh Akhenaten held court 3,500 years ago. Ironically, lately, I've been feeling very drawn to Tiamat. Same. I just watched Godzilla, King of the Monsters, or like, was it Godzilla and Kong or something like that? The one with Tiamat in it. And it just like has really brought her into my life again. It's crazy. When I do the dragon's flame ritual, I see an equal arm cross on the ground and each arm changed colors as I invoke the elemental dragons. You are killing me right now, Nightmare Fuel Studios. I'm covered in chills. Fuck, this book is blowing my mind away. Okay. Okay. It says the Celtic cross, as distinguished from crosses of other kinds, of which there are very many, traveled far and wide in prehistoric times, for it has turned up far off Oceania, marked on sacred stones of New Guinea, of Easter Island. I'm just reading this again. In Australia was found a pendant amulet of greenstone carved in the shape of a Celtic cross, an exact duplicate of an amulet found in Egypt at Tel El Amarna, the site of ancient city where Nefertiti and the pharaoh Akhenaten held court 3,500 years ago. The Algonquin and Sioux Indians of North America, that was racist. It's spelled Algonquin and Sioux, Native Americans of North America, as well as Arctic, Athabascan, and the tribes of Central America. So these are indigenous tribes to America. Associated the Equimard cross with the moon goddess, the water goddess, and the Arakunian moon priestess employed it in their sacred rituals. In China and Tibet, the Celtic cross, quote, figured promptly in the shrines of the great goddess and was widespread as the religious symbol throughout Western Asia, unquote. In the ruins of the Acropolis at Susa, ancient capital of the Persian Empire, which was situated on the site of an even more ancient Sumerian city, this cross has been found on shards of vases from the temple. And finally, in Spain, ancient Celtic coins have been found on which the Celtic cross is associated with the bull and the crescent, both of which are ancient symbols of the goddess and of the female supremacy. The Christian cross, with its long upright and short cross arms, has a different history, as we shall see in chapter 6, sexual symbolism. So we're probably not going to get into that one today. Low-key, it's giving Greek mythology. Help me, not judging. It sounds amazing. Yes, there's tons of Greek references in this book as well. It's not on purpose. It's what naturally happens when I do the ritual. It's what comes to me naturally. I'm not consciously choosing to use an equal arm cross. That's really fascinating, Nightmare Fuel Studios. Can anyone explain what is happening, Ziad Muhammad? I'm reading a book called The First Sex by Elizabeth Gold Davis. It's literally insane. On this channel, we do everything dragon related here. And let me tell you, as soon as I started reading this book and it started talking about Tiamat, which is a dragon goddess of ancient Sumeria, that blew me away. So I had to share it with you guys. Azura, do you have any experience working with Tiamat? Yes, but Tiamat, I'm not allowed to really discuss that yet. I really would love to, but like, I feel like literally this book is part of the process of me being able to get to a point where I can talk about it, but I really have to, I feel like, read this whole book with the hatchlings before I'm even close to being ready to share that with everybody. I've been reading Greek mythology a lot. It's affecting my dreams. I saw Pegasus in my dream. Okay, that's awesome. I'm obsessed with that. But let's see. Here we go. It says, the Celtic Druidic influence is far greater in our modern lives than is generally realized. It is from the Druids that most Christians derive their belief in the survival of the soul and in the guardian angels as spirits of the beloved dead. Hesiod, the poet of the Matriarchites, in the 8th century BC, wrote of the belief in angels as the guardian spirits of the dead, a concept which was no longer entertained by the Greeks of the classical age. The idea of the survival of the soul in angel form was no doubt common to the original religion and was preserved only among the Celts. What Gerard Murphy calls the strange loveliness of Celtic mythology may have its foundation in the fact that Celtic myth is the last echo of the primal universal religion of the matriarchal age, a religion that remains buried deep in the subconscious of modern man as part of his very psyche. And you know what? I'm kind of not, I wouldn't be surprised if like there's some truth to that, because like I feel like even the like conquering of Ireland is still really recent in modern history, and like Ireland was one of the last really, like, just Celtic lands in general were some huge like strongholds for witchcraft and like paganism and like mythology like that. But also, I don't think that like the super race originated from Ireland and the Celts. I think that is racist for people to say that. But what I do think is possible is that like when the British Empire was ruling everything and colonizing all of these lands and stealing resources, I feel like Ireland might have been one of the last strongholds for paganism, that kind of like could rival the Christian power or the Catholic power at the time. And so they had to find any way necessary to stamp the power, the pagan power out. I think that's very possible. I didn't know that witchcraft was in Ireland was the last. I don't know if it is. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that I wouldn't be surprised. I think it's possible. I think it's a possibility, because something that I would like to share with you guys is that in Wales, which is a Celtic country, Scandinavia was the last stronghold of paganism. Yeah, that makes sense. Nightmare Fuel Studios. But like Wales like even in the Welsh like tradition, there's just many different words for different types of witches and witchcraft. And the more that you study like Welsh history and like just like not only the Welsh language, but like just like the Welsh practices and like Welsh women, you'll find a lot of witchcraft there too. So Ireland is the land of fairies. I'm convinced it is. It absolutely is. Trust me. We're gonna continue. Ready? It says, these ideas are denied and discouraged by Christianity as they were by Judaism. St. Paul insists that our only hope for survival lies in the resurrection of the body at the Last Judgment, and the Old Testament, like Egyptian Antinism, teaches that there is no immortality of any kind. In Christian and Judaic angel lore, both derived from Persian cosmology, the angels represent a completely separate creation, never human, and only half divine. Moreover, in Christian belief, the angels are masculine, whereas in early Greek and Celtic religions, the angels, the spirits or anime of the dead, are always feminine. It is an ironic sidelight on Christians' symbolism that the male angels depicted in church art are the representations of none other than the great goddess herself. For when her cult was mercilessly wiped out in Rome and her temples were converted to Christian use, her winged image continued to be engraved on Roman coins and distance of the new Christian hierarchy in Constantinople. What could the beleaguered church then do but adopt her as the angel of the Lord, the Archangel Michael? Maybe. Hindus is still pagans? That's very possible, Zaid Muhammad. I could entertain that perspective, but I would have to look more into that to know for sure. Ireland was one of the last, but Scandinavia was the last. Yeah, that makes sense. Ireland and Scotland, definitely. Oh, I was hoping you could do a live on her history. Tell us what offerings she likes. Guess it's not gonna happen. It's not that it's gonna happen. It's just like the way that like my dragons work is I have to earn that. I have to like earn different things that I like share with people on the like on my thing. Have you read the Quran before? Yes, I have, Ziad. I have a video where I read the Quran. My dragons tell me to read about the Quran and all of the different religions that I can. Archangel Michael has always given me a strong feminine vibes, so that checks out. That's amazing. Oh my god, I'm getting so excited. Okay. Dragon, I will go even harder in my practice with Tiamat in hopes that I can share more about her soon. But I think it really just is part of the reason why this book found me, is because before I think I'm able to really discuss my practice with Tiamat, I think I'm supposed to really not only brush up on my brush up on my historical knowledge of her, if that makes sense. Have you listened to it in Arabic? Yes, I love listening to the Quran in Arabic. My dragon guardians and I love listening to the Quran in Arabic. Uriel gives me feminine vibes too. That's amazing. Angels low-key scare me. Yeah, they kind of do, isn't it? Arcane, yeah, honestly. All right, we're gonna continue for a second. Okay, it says, let's see. But back to Thrace. From Thrace, a later generation crossed over the narrow Hellespont to Anatolia and established there the prehistoric towns of Catal, Huyuk, Mersin, Hakiller, and Al-Laka, among others which have been excavated recently by archaeologists. The knowledge remembered by these matriarchal peoples account for the blossoming, as we have conjectured, of the great Sumerian civilization, which never seems to have had a beginning, as historians complain, overnight as it were, writes Thorkild Jacobson, Harvard Sumerologist. Sumerian civilization flashes into being completely in all its main features. Their knowledge of astronomy exceed that of modern man until AD 1930, for it was not until 1930 that Clyde Tombaugh discovered the ninth planet Pluto, and only in 1781 and 1846, respectively, had William Herschel discovered Uranus, the seventh planet, and Urbain Le Verrier Neptune, the eighth. Yet on seals dug up at the ancient sites in what was Sumer, our sun is shown with all 9 planets revolving around it. Not only that, but these same seals show other suns, other than ours, with other yet undiscovered worlds in orbit around them. The sun-centered universe, and then the plurality of worlds, a belief that was branded as hearsay by the Christian Church as recently as 400 years ago, was known to the ancient Sumerians 7,000 years ago. Whence had they gleaned this knowledge? Evidence is piling up that Anatolia, which earlier archaeologists had dismissed as a place arid of any traces of an early civilization, may have been the germinating point of all historical civilizations. Not only did the seeds of the ancient lost civilization lie dormant there, finally to burst forth into the great civilizations of Sumer, Crete, and Egypt, but when these had been destroyed by the patriarchs, the original seed found fallow ground again in Anatolian Ionia. Thence it blossomed in late historical times into the glory that was Athens, and into the great Celto-Ionian civilization that ended only 1,500 years ago, with the coming of official Christianity and the resultant fall of Rome, the two related events which ushered in the dark ages of medieval Europe. I have to just kind of think about that one for a second. So, we have learned that there are some echoes of ancient civilizations that had knowledge that we have only technically uncovered in recent times. Who really knows, to be honest with you? Because I certainly don't. I'm doing my best to understand. But here we go. We have Orpheus and Druidism. This is a good one. There was a source of the Anatolian miracle, the link between the great lost civilization and all the civilizations of historical times, including our own. The Thracians, wrote Herodotus, dwell amid lofty mountains clothed with forests and capped by snow. Their oracle is situated upon their highest mountaintop, and their prophet is a woman. From Thrace came the 9 muses, mountain goddesses, and Thrace was the home of the mysterious Maenads, of whom we shall have more to say presently. So this is really interesting. I think we do just have to remember when we read this book, I will keep reminding us that any mention that points towards a superior race is racist. Okay, glad we had that talk. Okay. Thank you for that. In Thrace, the goddess Diana was worshipped, and her worship took a form similar to that practiced by the ancient Celts of the British Isles. Both the Thracians and the Celts, according to Herodotus, invariably accompanied their offerings to the goddess as no other peoples did. The Wheathen straw from remote antiquity, writes Herodotus, the Hyperboreans, the people of the far north, i.e. the British Isles, had sent offerings to the temple of Diana at Delos. These gifts, wrapped in wheaten straw, were sent overland across Europe to the Adriatic Sea, down to the Sea of Corinth, to Euboea, and then to Tenos, whence the Tenetians, without stopping at Andros, brought them finally to Delos. In the Aegean Sea, the women of Thrace, he goes on, in their sacrifices to the queenly Diana bring wheat and straw, always with their offerings. Of my knowledge, I can testify that is so. But the usually ingenious Herodotus had no explanation for the similarity in the customs of these two widely separated peoples. It was the Delian Diana herself, according to Geoffrey of Monmouth, who directed the first Britons to England. When Brutus, the mythical founder of Britain, sought her out on Delos, she promised him that he would be the sire of a great race. Beyond the setting of the sun, past the realms of Gaul, there lies an island in the sea. Down the years, this island will prove an abode suited to your people. There, a race of kings will be born from your stock, and the whole circle of the world will be subject to them. That sent a chill down my spine. That sent a chill down my spine. I hated that sentence. Can I read that pitiful sentence again? It says, it was the Delian Diana herself, according to Geoffrey of Monmouth, who directed the first Britons to England. When Brutus, the mythical founder of Britain, sought her out on Delos, she promised him that he would be the sire of a great race. Quote, beyond the setting of the sun, past the realms of Gaul, there lies an island in the sea. Down the years, this island will prove an abode suited for your people. There a race of kings will be born from your stock, and the whole circle of the world will be subject to them, unquote. I'm gonna have to digest that one. Give me 2 business seconds. Give me 2 business seconds. I was absolutely meant to find this book. This crazy, holy shit. Okay. It says, where did I stop reading? It says, significantly, this Brutus, father of the British Celts, was an Anatolian, expelled from Italy, where he had gone with the defeated Trojans under Aeneas. He sought refuge in Greece, whence he was also expelled. On Delos he learned his true destiny, and by way of thanks to the goddess, he promised that she would become the goddess of his people forever. My people shall worship thee down the ages, and shall dedicate temples to you. And history proves him true to his word. For the Christians found the Celts of Gaul, Britain, and Ireland devoutly worshipping the goddess Dana, and the goddess of the forest glades and the wild woodlands, and sending yearly tributes to her ancient shrine of Aegean Delos. Diana was a very ancient Aegean goddess, far older than the Hellenic Greek myth of her twin birth with Apollo on Delos would make her. It must be remembered that the Greek myths as they have come down to us were late Hellenic interpretations of far more ancient legends. In many cases, the goddess had been split up and renamed in accordance with her various appellations in different parts of the world. Just as in late myth, the thunder god became Zeus, Thor, Jupiter, Jove, Jehovah, Yahweh, etc. In earlier myth and great goddesses had become known as Potnia, Ceres, Cybele, Athene, Diana, Artemis, Anat, Isis, Ishtar, Astarte, Minerva, Diana, etc. Dana Diana was the goddess of the Celts of Europe and the British Isles. Her name has been immortalized in many place names from the River Don to the Eastern Europe to London itself and to Ireland, where the Tuath de Danann, the people of the goddess Dana, were early Celtic settlers. The oak tree sacred to the ancient Theocrians or Thracians and to the Celtic Druids was connected with the goddess. Even in Italy, the grove of Diana at Aricia, whence Arinus plucked the mistletoe, the golden bow, was a grove of oaks, and the mistletoe was a Druidic sacrifice fetish. The Celtic Dana and the Delian Diana of classical Greece must both have originated in Thrace, where her temple at Herodotus said was on their highest mountaintop, and whose prophet was a woman. The Maenads were the priestesses of the Thriacrian goddess, and were therefore, like the later Celtic priests of Dana, Druids, custodians of the ancient wisdom. Business seconds of stealing that line. You better fucking use that one. You fucking better. My boy Thor got a mention. Hell yeah, dude. Hell yeah. People in the past were deaf smarter than us, and when we find something, we think it's amazing, and they probably have seen it a million times. Yeah, you're exactly right, Sophia. You're exactly right. This is why a lot of people today are very suicidal. Because we're so far removed from who we really are. We don't even want to be alive. That revelation kind of hurt a little bit. A little bit. Dude, we're literally on page 55. We've been going hard in this book. How many pages are in this book? 382. That's crazy. But I was gonna continue until the next chapter, which is a few more pages. So yeah, this is very interesting. It's kicking my ass, honestly. I am really pushing my abilities to see how long I can live read. It's actually a really good exercise. It's something that my guardians want me to do, to practice for like rituals and stuff. It's just good practice for me to keep talking for a long time. But anyway, let's see. It says, Thriacrian Orpheus is said by both Plato and Plutarch to have had access to ancient knowledge lost in Hellenic times. He knew, for example, that the sun was not the earth. For example, the sun and not the earth was the center of our universe, that other universes with other suns existed in the vastness of space, and that other worlds besides our own revolved around our sun. The Egyptians, writes Richard Knight, the Egyptians, writes Richard Knight, certainly could not have taught Orpheus the plurality of worlds and true solar systems which appear to have been the fundamental principles of his philosophy, nor could he have gained his knowledge from any people of whom history has preserved any memorials, for we know none among whom science has made such a progress that a truth as remote from common observation and so contradictory to the evidence of unimproved sense would not have been rejected, as it was by all sects of Greek philosophy, save that of Pythagoras. Pythagoras, after Orpheus, taught not only the plurality of worlds, the sun-centered universe, the theory of cataclysmic evolution, the periodic shifting of the poles, and the spherical shape of the earth, but also the theory of reincarnation and the immortality of the soul. Could he have learned all of this from Orpheus? And where had Orpheus learned it if not in Thrace, his homeland, that land of craggy mountain fastness where the scientific knowledge of the ancient mariners had been preserved when long forgotten elsewhere? Interesting. Does the book continue with dragons and witches, etc. to the end? Phoenix Holly, let's see. Let me just take a quick little peek into the future of this. Ooh, look at this. Look at how mad this guy is. See these notes? The guy who had the book before me is really mad about the stuff that they say about the women. Yeah, you know. Oh, look what I opened to. Chapter 22, Women in the Aquarian Age. I'm going to tell you right now, I have a feeling that this book is going to really talk about it all the way into this. It's just some medieval women, so you're getting some of that. We have, what's it called? We have Mary and the Great Goddess, Advent of Christianity, Tragedy of Western Women. There's a lot in here. There's even some entirely... There's like some hella written notes in here too. It's crazy. This book is crazy, you guys. This book feels so insane. Like, this is why earlier in the live, Sophia, I know you came in a little late, and Eddie, welcome to the live, and welcome back to your daily dose of Dragon Feather Love and Light to you too, my friend. But guess what? This book, I said earlier in the live, is like my Bible. I don't know why, but it has to be my Bible. And also, like in true biblical fashion, we have a map of the Middle East. Why? What is this book? I need this. I know. It's called The First Sex by Elizabeth Gould Davis. And I just have to learn more about this book. The better written Bible, no offense, honestly. But it is kind of like, woman supremacy. So like men should submit to women and be like second-class citizens, which might ruffle some feathers. I don't like that extreme. I want us to be unified personally, but to each their own. And I certainly love I love Lizzie's hot little takes in this book. So we're gonna keep going. It says, let's see. Okay. Let's see. Okay, it says Thrace was certainly inhabited by a highly civilized people at some remote period, writes Knight. For when Philip of Macedon in the 5th century BC opened the gold mines in the country that he found that had been worked before with great expense and ingenuity by a people well versed in mechanics, to whom no memorials whatsoever were then extant in any part of the known world. Here we have again the gold mines, the mines of the ancient mariners who sourced the world for gold and who knew more about our universe than modern science has yet been able to learn. Orpheus, the Thracian, passed on his knowledge of the cosmos to Pythagoras. Could it have been Orpheus, too, who let Epicurus into the secret of atomic theory? Both Pythagoras and Epicurus were among the ancient philosophers whose works were deliberately destroyed during the Dark Ages of Europe, when, as Gibbon charges, the light of learning was deliberately quenched by the Christian Church. Thus, over 2 millennia were to pass before Kepler, Galileo, and Copernicus rediscovered which Orpheus, Aristarchus, and Pythagoras had proclaimed to the ancients, and before Albert Einstein stumbled upon the ancient anatomic theory of Epicurus. Sir William Harvey, in his discovery of the circulation of the blood, was only finding anew what the ancients had been aware of, as Philostratus states. The theory of evolution, too, 2,400 years before Darwin, had been known to Anaximander, but was later discredited by Aristotle. Aristotle, quote, the wisest of the pagans, unquote, was revered by the early Christians, who therefore preserved his works while criminally destroying the works of his betters. He was a herald of medieval ignorance, and unwittingly ally of the church fathers. It was because of Aristotle's denial of the ancient truth known to the Sumerians, the Chaldeans, and the early Greeks that the earth was a sphere revolving around the sun, that the Christian church was able for so long to defend its dogma that the earth was a platform supported by the columns of hell and roofed by the vault of heaven, over which the sun obligingly rose and set. But all these things were known to the sages of the pre-Aristotelian world of the 7th and 6th centuries BC, the time of the 7 sages so revered by the classical Greeks for their possession of ancient truths discarded or discredited by the time of Plato and forgotten by the time of Plutarch. Could Orpheus have been the transmitter of the, quote, ancient wisdom to the sages? And could it be that he died for revealing it? According to myth, Orpheus was murdered by the Maenads for various worldly reasons. But if the Maenads were Druidesses, as I have surmised, they were in reality the custodians of the ancient wisdom, and Orpheus was killed by them because he himself, a Druid, had revealed their secrets. I don't know how to process this book, you guys. OMG, I needed this. The better written Bible. No, stop. I remember I was on my dream. I tried to read the Bible or I don't know, a book, and I wake up to this. Oh my gosh. Dude, I don't even know. I literally was like, I asked my whole spirit team, because I've like recently made a really huge shift in my practice to just be like, I had a huge pivot, and a part of it is like decolonization, anti-racist, and like activism is like a huge part of it, and I'm getting a lot of trash for it. I am getting a lot of flack for just doing the right thing. And I'll take that shit because that is what I'm here to do. But it's just like hitting me in a way that's really a lot harsher than I ever anticipated it to be. Just, you know, people who have a lot more power than I do lashing out because of the decisions that I make and the things I talk about and the things I support and champion on this channel and just publicly and personally. Do you have a Discord, Jupiter Haven? Dear Lord, I need to make one. I'm literally so upset that that is something that's asked every time I go live and I still don't have one. I am deeply sorry, my friend. I will do everything I can to get a Discord set up after I get off this live because that is a good decision for all of us, especially with this book. I'll make a specific channel in the chat on the Discord server. The first sex in the Discord server will be 18 plus because I just don't believe in chatting with minors. Sorry. I don't know. Why is that a hot fucking take? Anyway. I digress. Here we go. Let me see where I left off. Okay. It says... Okay, it says, according to later Hellenic mythology, Orpheus was slain by Zeus for divulging divine secrets. Zeus is obviously an anachronism here, for the new god could not have been privy to the divine secrets or the ancient wisdom, as the Greeks called it. The reason given in the later myth for Orpheus's execution may be that the true one, but his executioners were the Maenads, the Druidesses, not Zeus. The Druids, like Orpheus and Pythagoras, thought that immortality of the soul and the theory of reincarnation, a fact which led the classical writers of Rome to conclude that the Druids of Gaul and Britain, quote, had been influenced by Pythagoras, unquote. The shoe, however, is on the other foot. Orpheus and Pythagoras had been influenced by the Druids, the Maenads of Thrace. It was from them that Orpheus had learned the ancient wisdom which had been passed on to the 7 sages, of whom Anaximander, the tutor of Pythagoras, was one. You can do lives in your Discord, so only the hatchlings can watch. Ooh, Nightmare Fuel Studios. You fucking got it, bitch. I love that idea. This book is ruining my day in the best way. The best way. Okay. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, basically 4 and some change pages left before I'm honestly out of breath. I would love to keep reading, but I have been reading for however long 190 minutes is, pretty much nonstop, and I honestly think that's amazing. That's kind of amazing. Okay. Anyway. Let's see. It says, according to Porphyr, Pythagoras was born on the Aegean island of Samos, of Etruscan father and Cretan mother. At an early age, he was sent to Miletus in Caria to be instructed by Anaximander. Later, he studied under Aristoclea at the great college at Delphi and Phocis or Phocis. There later, another woman, Theocla, a pupil of Pythagoras, was to become high priestess. Porphyrial relates an esoteric tale of once Zalamoxis, a Thracian led whom Pythagoras loved, quote, who was also called Thales, unquote. Now, Thales was one of the 7 sages of Greece, a possessor of the, quote, ancient wisdom, unquote, and is supposed to have come from Caria. But was he actually a Thracian like Orpheus before him? And was Zalamoxis also like Orpheus, a Druid? It's Porphyry. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but it says Porphyr has very little to say about the mysterious Zalamoxis, yet he emphasized the seemingly irrelevant fact that he, quote, wore a bandage about his forehead, unquote. This may be a reference to an ancient pre-Druidic aspect of the original goddess religion, for it is reminiscent of the band worn by the Maenads in some Greek bas-reliefs of headbands worn by later Druids and Druidesses of Europe. Geoffrey of Monmouth writes that when the Celtic Brutus and his followers sought out the goddess Diana on her island, quote, they wrapped fillets around their brows according to the age-old rite, unquote. Authors' fillets around their brows, according to the author's italics. Celtic warrior queen, too, are shown wearing this band about their temples. Celtic queens were considered incarnations of the goddess, and, quote, the ancient king and druid owed allegiance to the goddess incarnate in the queen, unquote. Whoo, that's crazy. I will take a break, Sophie. I'm almost done with the chapter. He did pop in here towards the end. We're literally on page 58. It's kind of insane. But it's crazy. I have just found this book on Kindle Unlimited with annotation. Dude, hell yeah, Jenna Evans. I'm gonna also see if I can find this book too and like link it in the description because it's actually such a good book. I'm really loving it. But let us jump back into this one. It says, I conclude, writes E.R. Dodds, that Orpheus is a Thracian figure of much the same character as Zalamoxis. That is, a shaman priest or prototype of shamans. He, Orpheus, combines the professions of poet, magician, religious teacher, and oracle giver. Like shamans everywhere, he pays a visit to the underworld. Finally, his self lives on as a singing head. Such mantic heads appear in Northern mythology and in Irish tradition. I'm gonna cry. Can I read something again? The whole entire point of my whole being is literally this sentence. Combines the professions of poet, magician, religious teacher, and oracle giver. Add musician in there too. And that's pretty much what I do. And then it says, becomes a singing head. In Northern mythology and Irish tradition, shamans are druids. The druids of Celtic societies, like Orpheus, combined the professions of poet, magician, religious teacher, and oracle giver. In Irish Celtic legend, Cuchulainn, like Orpheus, pays a visit to the underworld. In Welsh Celtic myth, the hero Bran, again like Orpheus, continues to speak after his head has been severed from his body. Is that why the oracle, the warg, what is he called in Game of Thrones? His name is Bran, but he inherits the three-eyed raven. He becomes the three-eyed raven. Poets and musicians are kind of related. I'll give you that one, Nightmare Fuel Studios. That will make sense to me. Then maybe I should say songstress, because honestly I'm talking about like no words, just sounds. Let's see. Some could argue that words are just sounds. Is that why they're related, Nightmare Fuel Studios? Fine, I'll give you guys that one. Fine. My little musician biased brain is pissed about it, but I'll give you guys that one. Let's see. It says, in Northern mythology, oh wait, no, I just read that. In the Greek myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, Orpheus repairs to the underworlds to retrieve Eurydice, who has gone there unwillingly. But Eurydice is a typical Celtic underworld queen, a fairy queen, sister to the Celtic Lorelei, mermaid, who lures men into danger. The list of Celtic heroes enchanted by fairy women is endless, and it begins with Orpheus. What in the fresh fuck did I just read? In the Greek myth of Orpheus and Eurydice, Orpheus repairs to the underworld to retrieve Eurydice, who has gone there unwillingly. But Eurydice is a typical Celtic underworld queen, a fairy queen, sister to the Celtic Lorelei, mermaid, who lures men into danger. The list of Celtic heroes enchanted by fairy women is endless, and it begins with Orpheus. Orpheus is said to have been able to charm the very stones and trees with charismatic eloquence, and eloquence was ever a trait of the Celts. Moreover, the Celtic Gauls, according to Lucian, in the 2nd century AD, worshipped Orpheus in the form of Ogmios, their god of eloquence, and the Irish Celtic god Ogma was also a god of poetry and speech. The oak tree was sacred to the Druids of Gaul and Britain, and at Zone in Thrace, in classical times, there was a grove of oaks sacred to Orpheus. It seems obvious then that Orpheus was an early Druid and therefore an early Celt. He was a renegade Druid, however, and he met his death at the hands of the Druidesses, the holy wise women of Thrace. Thus, just as Thrace is the missing link between the lost civilization and the historical civilization, so Orpheus, the mystery man of antiquity, is the link between the ancient religion and the historical Druidism that has left so deep a mark on modern Western religious belief. Wow! For Druidism was a goddess religion, and the Christians of Europe long remained true to their ancient goddess. The Romans had sought to abolish Druidism in their provinces, even going so far as to cut down the sacred oaks of Mona, Angliessa, in the Irish Channel, but only because of its necromantic aspects. They had no objection to goddess worship. They practiced it themselves. The Irish Celts, credited with having been the most easily converted of the pagans, were not converted at all. They merely changed the name of their goddess to Mary and went on worshipping her as before, and ritual Druidism went underground with the fairy folk. Sweet Mary and Joseph. I literally saw a video earlier today talking about how sacred the oak tree is to the Old Norse. Today is fun, do 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 do. We're learning crazy things, do 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 do. My brain is fried, do 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 do. And let's continue the story, do do do. Okay, it says the sacred bull. Perhaps the most widespread cult of the ancient world was the cult of the bull, the beast sacred to the great goddess. Even in the most remote reaches of myth and antiquity, wherever the goddess reigned supreme, we find the sacred bull beside her. The ancient Cretan god Poseidon, son of Potnia, the powerful one, was a bull god as well as a fish god. Plato tells us that Poseidon was the god of Atlantis, and that on Atlantis the bull was worshipped. The first ruler of Atlantis, mentioned by Diodorus Siculus in the 1st century BC, but not by Plato, was Queen Basilia, who predated Poseidon. She it was, writes Diodorus in his mammoth library of history, who brought order and law and justice to the world after a bloody war against the forces of evil and chaos. She was a warrior queen after the Celtic fashion, a prototype of Cartissimandua, Velda, Boadicea, and Tamris. Queen Belicia became the great goddess of 100 names, yet only one personality, who was subsequently revered throughout the ancient world. The unimaginable antiquity of this great queen illustrated by the fact that she was said to be the daughter of Gaia, the primeval goddess who in later Hellenic myth created the world from chaos, and was thus antecedent to Kronos, old father time himself, who was Gaia's son. Wherever goddess worship spread, the sacred bull accompanied it. In India, where the bull is worshipped to this day, the bull cult was part of the goddess cult that prevailed there until Rama's time. Apis, the bull god of Egypt, sacred to Isis, has long been known as the bull god, the golden calf, of ancient Palestine and Syria. Free Palestine, free Palestine, free Palestine, free Palestine. No way, I just found Palestine in this fucking book. I'm gonna cry, mashallah. I'm gonna fucking cry. What the hell? Okay, let me pull myself together to read that shit again. It says, wherever goddess worship spread, the sacred bull accompanied it. In India, the bull is worshipped to this day. The bull cult was part of the goddess cult that prevailed there until Rama's time. Apis, and the bull god of Egypt, sacred to Isis, has long been known as the bull god, the golden calf. It really does say ancient Palestine. It's a, bruh. ancient Palestine. Not ancient Israel, you bitches. No, I'm just kidding. And Syria. This was Moloch, sacred to the Syrian goddess Ea, Tiamat, who was known and worshipped as Anat or Neith among the Jewish people. Excavation at Nevaeh, Babylon, and Ur, as well as the lesser cities of the Tigris-Euphrates Valley, reveal that the bull accompanied the worship of the great fish goddess Tiamat, who is often depicted as a mermaid, as on a seal dug up at Nevaeh. Poseidon has been identified as a later aspect of the same fish goddess. When I say we're all connected, I fucking mean that shit. The bull cult of ancient Crete has been well publicized through the story of the Minotaur, who represented generations of sacred bulls kept in luxury in the labyrinth, and to whom possibly captive youths and maidens were occasionally sacrificed. He was sacred to the ancient goddess Potnia, prime deity of Crete and later of Mycenae. The bull and the labyrinths of double acts of Crete were the symbols of goddess worship and matriarchal rule throughout the ancient world, and they have been found carved or painted on the walls of caves of the Paleolithic Europe, the temples of Neolithic Anatolia, and the Stonehenge in England, as well as the Bronze Age Crete, Ionia, Pylos, Mycenae, Tyrians, and the Italian Umbria and Rome. In pre-Hellenic Athens, the sacred bull took part in the cult of the great goddess Athene. As Aristophanes recalls in both the frogs and the clouds. The bull cult in Greece, however, went out with the advent of Zeus in the 8th century, for contrary to popular belief, Zeus did not achieve any stature in Greek religion, according to W.K.C. Theory, until the time of Hesiod and Homer. Homer's elevation of Zeus in the Iliad was an anachronism, a Leonard Cantrell points out. Zeus was a very minor god at the time of the Trojan War. That Homer knew this himself is shown by the fact that the Iliad gives Athene priority over Zeus, the king of the gods. Free Palestine. Bitch. That's some wild coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. When I see shit like this, after the day that I've had asking my entire spirit team to give me a book that perfectly shows why I am who I am today, just any sign, but preferably something to read, because that's read and writing is the most important thing to me in my life. So it was like either like something I can write in or something I can read in is always going to be the thing that's the most important in my practice. Hence, you probably know me because I used to make books on this channel, and I will be making some new ones here soon, but I digress. The fact that I wasn't going to do everything that happened today that led me to this book is why I believe in dragons, and why the entire time, every time I pick up this book, all I hear is dragons laughing behind me. I've never had that experience with anything, and that's why I'm saying this is my fucking Bible. What the fuck? Can't believe I found Palestine in this shit. Losing it. This book was written in 1971, for context. Just so you know. But let me get back into this shit. It was not until the 6th century, because we're almost done. We have a couple more pages, and then I have to get going because it's just ridiculously early in the morning. It says, it was not until the 6th century BC that the Greek religious reformers, as Guthrie calls them, promoted Zeus to first place in the Greek pantheon. Orpheus must have lived just prior to the time of Greek religious reform. Some myths place him among the Argonauts of the generation before Troy, but about 1300 BC, but more reliable evidence dates him after the Dorian invasion and more or less contemporary with Thales, Anaximander, and Pythagoras of the 6th century, or at the earliest with Thamyris and Sappho of the 7th. Sappho is said to have rescued his singing head from the beach at Lesbos. In Orpheus's homeland, Thrace, the bull had long been sacred to the goddess, yet an Orphic religion which preached the supremacy of Zeus over Hera, the bull continued to hold its ancient place. The fact constitutes further proof that Orpheus was a renegade Druid, a heretic to the old religion, for the Druids of Thrace had always worshipped the bull, and the bull worship persisted among later Celts as late as the 4th century AD. The bull was worshipped by the Celts, and its immolation was part of the Druidic ceremony, as had been the Orphic and Athenian religions. In India, Egypt, Crete, and Anatolia, the bull was not immolated, i.e. sacrificed. The Celtic Picts of Scotland worshipped the bull and the goddess down to the 17th century, when the Scottish Church found it necessary to denounce bull sacrifice among the peasantry as sacrilegious. We can follow the bull cult from its point of origin in the locale of lost civilization, call it Atlantis or what you will, to prehistoric Sumer and the historic Babylon, Crete, Egypt, Syria, and Greece. It thrived in Thrace and Celtic Europe and Britain until modern times, and it always followed the goddess cult. Its last manifestation in organized religion was in Druidism. In the past decade, in archaeological work at the site of the oldest town in history, Çatalhöyük in Anatolia, the link between mythical and the historical has been found. For there, where the great goddess was undeniably supreme, the only creature who shares her shrines and temples is her sacred bull. She was the divinity, and with her went the sacred bull of Plato's lost continent. And that is the end of chapter 2 in part 1. I don't normally live stream this late. We will continue this read along. I don't know how or when, if it'll be just we'll keep continuing this book until we get through it together, because it's just like literally that important, or we'll take our time with it. I'm not sure yet. I have to kind of digest today's stream with my guardians, but let me tell you something. I don't know how to process this book. This book is so special to me, you guys. Like, I can't even believe that I found this. I hope that you all are able to get your hands on this book. We will go through the whole book, going through this together in lives. I think it's so required. And I can't even believe any of this. Like, anything that I find, you know, like, look, after we get through part 1, part 2 is called the Patriarchal Revolution. Like, this book is hard and heavy. Like, if you want, before I go tonight, I'm just gonna read you some of the table of contents. Okay. I have a magic dragon ring that snags things when I am doing things I shouldn't do. And I just snagged my blanket that I love. Right as I was saying I was gonna read the contents. That's my dragons trying to tell me to shut the fuck up. So I will find a happy medium. I'm going to find one thing I can read you guys. It says, let's see. It says, okay, I'm trying to see which one would be the best, but the one I will share with you guys is the sexual revolution under the patriarchal revolution. Very exciting. My dragon ring snags things all the time. Isn't that true? It's so much funny. Marios, welcome. We are heading out for the day, so I do recommend taking some time to re-listen to this stream, because it was one of the most insane streams maybe of my entire career on this channel. Mine is a dragon claw grasping a red gemstone. Oh my gosh, I love that. That's so beautiful. But please, everybody, go check out The First Sex by Elizabeth Gould Davis. I really recommend that you guys read this if you practice witchcraft. If you are a woman, you have to, if you're just a human being, you have to read this book. I require it. I think this is the unofficial Bible of humanity. And I feel like I have this rule that all Bibles, all holy books that I use must be black with gold lettering, and I will only consider a book black with gold lettering if it has, if it is that way, you know what I mean? I know that might be very specific. This is just a very, very sacred practice in my practice. And I find the holy books in my life through that definition of my reality. And the cover of the book has worn off, but it is a black book with gold letters. So this is crazy, you guys. I just really cannot wait to jump back on here and read more of this. I'm gonna open just a random page and just to read you some things. Look, this one says Lu and the Great Goddess. Like this book is gonna get so good. Like, this is page 222. I just opened to an angel number in this book. Like, this book is so special. I don't even understand. And I have read this book to you fresh off the press, fresh home. Like, I have so much work that I do with books, and I think I'm going to tell you, kind of take you guys along that journey with me, and share it with you guys, because I know that a huge part of my practice is, like, I don't know how else to describe it other than book work. I develop relationships with the spirit of books, with the consciousness and energy they hold. I also bookbind. It's a huge part of it's a huge part of me, like, being a bookbinder. I make a lot of book tutorials. If you are new on this channel, check out my old videos where I show you guys how to make DIY books. I'll be making new ones because I can use literally a sewing machine, and much better. I can make it much better now, so I'm very excited to share all that with you guys. But if you guys are interested in some maybe daily readings about this one, this book, I will share some random excerpts on my what's it called, on my Instagram in my story for daily reference. But I'm also going to do another deep dive of this book on my TikTok, just because I feel like I want to break it down a little bit differently than I am live reading it with you guys here. So basically, after I live read parts of this book with you guys, I'm going to go over to TikTok and then break it down even further. And then once I do that, I'm going to go back in with my guardians and break it down for the third time, just to help me really process and understand this book and this just understanding. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching and choosing to spend some of your day with me today. You guys were amazing. I'm going to be making another book that'll be just about dragon magic and the teachings they've taught me. I plan on handwriting in runes. Yeah, dude, Nightmare, that is like I super resonate with that. That's a very big similar project that I'm working on, and I feel like a lot of us who are like super dedicated and really connect with dragon medicine have a similar practice too. So I think that's really fascinating as well, because, like, you know, I've never like met you guys in person, if you will, and we don't really know, you know, we really don't know the things that we do personally. It's kind of crazy. I want to use a quill pen and dragon's blood ink. Yes, that would be amazing. We should totally talk about how to like dragonify everything in a book of shadows. That would be a great video. But anyway, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. I'm having so much fun. This book is amazing. I think we're just gonna have to pile through this book until we finish it together, because that just sounds like fun. So thank you guys so much for choosing to spend some of your day with me. But until next time, stay geeky, cheeky, and freaky. Little hatchlings, listen me in. Bye.